Madam Mayor, it's 6 o'clock.
Yeah,
And the lyrics tonight are?
make it up as you go.
Okay, City Attorney, do you wanna?
I have a special meeting.
Yes, Madam Mayor. The special meeting tonight was going to be to hear an amendment to the Economic Development Incentive Agreement with the MID. We need to address an issue that has come up with the bond that they're to provide for the infrastructure improvements. The amendment is not quite there yet, so we are pushing it to February 4th.
Okay, so then I would start the electric utility meeting.
Yes.
There you go.
Okay, good. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this Tuesday, January 28th, Electric Utility City Commission meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Mayor Pam Triola,
Here.
Vice Mayor Andy Amorosa,
Here.
Commissioner Scott Maxwell, absent for the vote, for the roll, Commissioner Maury Hardy,
Here.
Commissioner Herman Robinson.
All right.
Just all.
If everyone would please rise for the pledge led by the Vice Mayor.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No prayer necessary.
Okay, are there any additions, deletions, or reordering?
No, Madam Mayor.
Seeing there are none, we'll move on to the presentations, the FY 2019 results and scorecard.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. Ed Liberty speaking for the Electric Utility. And to my right, we have Michael Taylor, who will play a role a little bit later in the meeting. He's with Simple Mind, which is a marketing agency which has been helping us in the launch of our new website. So we'll get to that. Coming attractions. So tonight marks the report or the end of fiscal 19, which actually passed a few months ago now, but we'll be reporting out on the results. But I wanted to take a moment to pause and just think about where we came from to where we are today, really over the past 2 years. So while this is going to be an FY19, some of the data in here is really the end of the full second year of this renewal of the electric utility. So in that 2 years, we've accomplished a lot of things. We've created, first of all, the wherewithal and the tools to produce the documents that we're going to review tonight. Having a very good understanding of our cost, what's driving our costs, and where our costs are trying to go, but also show what we've been able to accomplish in terms of performance improvements, so our scorecard, if you will. We've got the plant operating in pretty good condition. It has answered the call. We had some hiccups in late 17, but it was repaired and the plant has been operating well. We've negotiated new agreements with our workforce, together with some catch-ups, if you will, on salary increases that were due to them in the past 2 years, largely with the IBW, but not just them, but the other folks as well. And particularly within the IBW, we took steps to increase the compensation for our linemen, particularly our linemen, to get them better aligned with the competition. Now, I can't say that we're exactly at the same wage rate, but with the retroactive raises that we did and the step increase that we gave, particularly to the linemen, we closed that gap significantly. I know they're not here to speak to that, but I do believe that they are appreciated, and it certainly helped us retain some people that were very, very valuable, but also give them the just compensation they're due for the great work they do for us. And while we will present great results tonight, we forget that a lot of those results come from the hard work that they do every day. We also have done great things with respect to reducing outages. We're going to talk about that, controlling costs, and charting a path to the future. We've identified what projects we need to undertake and laid them out into a 5-year capital plan between transmission and distribution, and we've force ranked them, so we see the path forward. We've also benchmarked our performance to other utilities in the state, so we have a good understanding of just how bad we are, and I'll be very blunt, in some cases how bad, but also how good we are, because there are cases where we are doing better than our sister utilities around the state. Now, we don't have those comparisons tonight because not all of the data has been published yet, because it's done on a calendar year basis, but we know our results, and later on in the next few months, we'll have the comparisons to the other utilities. We'll be able to give that to you as well. We've also greatly improved the performance of staff. We've reorganized the staff and put them into clearer lanes and given more clear authority within their lanes and supported them and encouraged them. And we're also putting them in all through leadership training courtesy of our HR department. So staff is developing well, and we've also got some new additions to the team that you'll meet as we go through. And we continue to recruit and bring people in. So the picture is getting better. We're on the right path. On the environmental side, we're making great strides. So we've signed, as you know, with your approval, we entered into 2 agreements for solar, a 10 megawatt agreement, and also a 26.55 megawatt agreement, both through FMPA to significantly grow our solar presence and drive us towards a greater than 50% carbon-free footprint by 2024. And I keep repeating that because it's part of our mantra, and you're going to see that in the marketing materials going forward. So we're on the right path. We're doing the right things. This is a report card along the way, if you will, at the end of the sophomore year, if you will, at the end of the second year, as to how we're doing. And we'll take questions and provide answers throughout this report. Now, as I always do in these things, and I learned in the private sector, I would call these non-GAAP numbers. These are extracts from the city's financials with adjustments where we think the numbers needs to be more accurately reflected. So it's the definitive financials, of course, will be published when the city publishes its audited financials, which are still some time away, and finance is working on that. But this is the extract from those to give us a dashboard, if you will, on a consistent basis so we can compare ourselves not just quarter to quarter, but year to year. So having said that, you ready to go?
Ready to go?
Okay, thank you. Financial overview. This looks at our, if you will, operating income on a quarter-to-quarter basis, and it lists all of the quarters of the year. You see the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, and it compares our actual versus our budget. So if we just looked at the far right, bottom right-hand corner, we see 12.119 million. That's where we actually came in at in terms of operating income against what we had forecasted or had budgeted at 9.7 million. So we came in better than expected on operating income. Now, as you'll see, if you take a look at the bottom of the second quarter, you say, wow, we did great in the first quarter. The second quarter, we actually had a loss of $38,000, and then we went back up to 3.2, then 3.1. So what is it that happens in the second quarter that drags that down? We flip to the next slide. I want to point out that weather drives our business. So we don't have a big industrial load. We don't have a huge commercial base. We're largely residential. Of our 27,000 or so meters that are out there, about 3,000 are commercial. All the rest are residential. So we're largely driven by weather. So if you look at the left-hand side, and this is degree days, and this is degree days across the entire calendar year. But if you look at the far left-hand side, that's actually the first 3 months, January, February, March, are actually the second quarter of the fiscal year. So if you flip back to the prior page and you say, wow, we didn't do so good in the second quarter, and then you look at the volatility on degree days, in combination, you say, that's probably why. It gets very, very difficult when you're setting budgets to forecast ahead what's going to happen with degree days. As a matter of fact, we don't forecast what's going to happen with degree days. We forecast off of prior year's performance and then look ahead to where we think we're going to be. When the weather doesn't do what the weather did in prior years, it's very volatile, as you can see on the left-hand side here. It will drive our performance. Similarly, on the far right, you see volatility again in the last month of the year. So the 10th and 11th months was not a lot of volatility, a little bit of choppiness at the top of the chart, but in the 12th month, a lot of volatility. So that'll affect the fourth quarter as well. But having said all of that, we still did significantly better than we had expected to. Now, what we're going to go through the next few slides, we're going to get into a little bit more detail on where those things come from. So if we take a look at some of the numbers here, and there's a lot of different things, but I want to point out the biggest things because they're the most notable. If we look at residential sales and commercial sales, lines 3 and line 4 at the far right-hand side, you see that on the residential side, we were $236,000 below budget. That means that our residential customers used $236,000 less worth of our product than we expected them to. Commercial, $923,000. That's a big number. Now, as you'll see in some subsequent slides, this is the bad news. The good news is that from a revenue perspective, we were pretty close to what we did prior year, but on the commercial, but the residential revenue grew significantly. So even though we didn't hit the budget, we did grow over the prior year. So there's a growth story here. I won't go through all of the detail here unless there's some specific questions on individual line items, and we'll just move on to the next page.
Can we ask questions?
Sure, Commissioner, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor.
Real quick, so convenience fees, that's the $2 fee?
That's correct. That's the $2 fee that
Okay,
people pay
so
to.
we won't have that next year,
Cor-
or this year.
Correct. We won't have it in 2020. We did budget it going to zero in all of 2020. It's actually, we did collect them for the first quarter, starting, which we did through October, November, December, and January. Actually, January, we switched over and had people paying off-site. So
And
we get one quarter convenience fees.
By moving it off-site, it's an easier pay. However, do we show any financial gain anywhere else
The only-
by having it off-site?
The finance, we'll see some financial gain in a few areas. One is in armored truck services, for example. We won't be taking cash out of the building anymore. That's a relatively small number. It's about $10,000 a year. And I believe it actually hits a finance budget. I don't think it actually hits a utility budget, the armored services. What we gain, though, however, is, and there's actually a slide later on in the presentation that shows the foot traffic. There's about 4,000 people per month that come into that building to make payments that they don't need to come there to make anymore. They can make them closer to home or pay near me. Pay near them, actually, right? Not near me. So they can actually go make their payments. I don't take those payments myself. I don't show up at 1900.
And by moving that, we didn't lose any employees, correct?
No.
They were just moved into other departments and are doing other jobs. Right?
That's correct. Actually, they actually stayed in the same department. The teller or the cashier actually stayed in the same department and will be taking on other tasks in that same department. But what it's done for us is it's greatly relieved, or starting in February, because January is the last month where they came in to try to make a payment. That was the third month in which we had already told them, you need to go pay off site, gave them barcodes, so they go pay off site. Actually, physically, if they needed help, loaded it onto their cell phones for them, because virtually all of them have a smartphone. The people that come in to pay with cash, and showed them how to do it. And they leave the building with it already on their smartphone, and they go pay off site.
And that's 100% off-site now, right?
That's
Doing
correct.
nothing else.
100% off-site on cash and credit card and check. They can just drop in the box, but we won't physically take a check in person. They can drop it in the box. But those 4,000 folks that were coming through the doors during the business days of the month are basically filling the building to benefit from a service that we don't add any value in. And we were squeezing them into the 5 business days during business hours. Now they can make those payments 7 days a week, 24 hours a day at off-site locations for a penny cheaper. So instead of paying us $2, they pay $1.99 for the same service.
And refresh our memories for the record, we're not paying for that service.
That's correct. We don't pay a fee for that service.
There's no additional fee
None.
for that service.
None.
Moving to the next line, pole attachment.
Yes.
So we heard that we went out and renegotiated pole attachments for, is that the renegotiation with AT&T and things like that?
That's the renegotiation with Comcast. The AT&T numbers haven't come in yet, but we have reached agreement on the rate that they will pay.
Okay.
What we're still negotiating with AT&T is the settlement amount, or if you will, the payment for prior years, where we need to catch
Well,
up.
we had
because
heard that that's going to be about $50,000, so none of these numbers show that yet.
not on AT&T. It does show the numbers from Comcast.
Okay.
So Comcast, we reached agreement with. They've started paying the higher rate. By the way, AT&T has also agreed to pay the higher rate effective last year. So that's proceeding.
But we haven't seen those in these numbers yet.
Correct. So these numbers will reflect what Comcast paid, if you will, as the catch-up. I don't know if it's really called a settlement, but it's the catch-up for prior years. Comcast also paid for a portion of the audit that we had done to determine just how many poles they were attached to. Those audits hadn't been done in probably 20 years.
The Comcast was the $50,000. The AT&T is still being negotiated.
Yes.
And the difference between the budget and the actuals, the 110 and the 177, what's the difference in that?
We did not budget the catch-up fees, if you will, and the reimbursement on the audits, because we didn't know we would be able to negotiate that. So we budgeted what we thought we could get in a realistic fee, which they were working towards agreeing to at the time, but we didn't budget an assumption on a settlement or a share of the audit that we had done. So that came in as unbudgeted.
And then when will we see obviously Comcast is the first one. When will we see those numbers?
For AT&T,
For,
Yeah.
well, Comcast, they're already
the
paying it.
money's in the house and they're paying at the new rate.
So this includes
Yes.
Comcast, but
Yes.
AT&T we're still.
AT&T is still in the works. We've reached agreement with AT&T on the rate that they would pay. We're currently trying to resolve the difference in the pole count. So what's happened over the years since these audits were last done is that poles were added or removed. So in some cases they added poles. In other cases, the city probably replaced poles that belonged to AT&T without going through the process of notifying them, or maybe they didn't notify us. So we've got a discrepancy in opinion, difference in opinion, if you will, on who owns how many poles and which ones. So we're working towards a solution to that, which is partly negotiation, but also partly some technical people in the field actually go out and look at the poles and decide, is this ours or is it yours?
So we got an update from our attorney along those lines. As soon as those documents and those numbers are available, can we see that again?
Yes.
So we can see, Comcast, the numbers, because we were told, Comcast is coming in at a certain number, it'll go up. Can we look at all that
Yep.
again with AT&T, Comcast, and anyone else
Yes,
we're negotiating?
we'll bring that back because I believe the settlement will have to be agreed to ultimately. So, and we'll share those numbers. What we wanted to have is parity across the entities. We also wanted to eliminate, if you will, subleasing or lashings, if you will, where other people were lashing onto, for example, either AT&T or Comcast.
And we weren't getting compensated for it.
Correct. So we're addressing those types of issues. Big things to address there too are the speed of response during an emergency. Who's going to replace the pole if there's an accident overnight, and if we replace it, how will we be compensated if it happens to be an AT&T pole, for example, and it's an emergent situation? We don't want to walk away from it, and they wouldn't want us to either. But technically, they would have the right to come out and replace it. Practically, we wind up doing it, and there needs to be a process put in place by which we bill them for the work that we did. That means that when we bill them has to be understood up front, so it's not a wild number that we just pick out of thin air at the moment, right? It needs to be based in some fact and has an audit trail to it, and they agree to it.
Well, and if I remember right, especially I think AT&T, they weren't even having conversations with us. We couldn't even, get a conversation started. Has that gotten better?
That has gotten better.
I know Palm Beach was having a problem with that
Right.
too.
Paul, I'm glad to report that Paul Nicholas has developed a better relationship with their operating folks on the ground, and that seems to be working, and it's getting better. Is it exactly what we would like it to be? Not quite yet, but it's a marked improvement from where we were 6 months ago.
Well, especially in emergencies and who's going to pay for it and who's going to rebuild it, so to speak. We need to make sure that we know exactly what's going on.
Right. And the big issue that came up, 6 months ago or so was the Boutwell Road, where we were under construction in Boutwell Road. We needed those poles moved, and they were just not responding. I know council was working on it extensively. I was working on it. Paul was working on it. Brian, who from our power side, was working on it as well, helping out. We just could not get them to respond. It was very, very difficult. The new relationship seems to be bridging that, and they're at least communicating with Paul. Big things to resolve with them are exactly what's the cost to replace the pole. So we're more than glad to share and have shared with them our actual costs based on the bids and what we actually pay for the poles, and what our labor costs are, whether we have to use a crane or not, how that drives the cost.
And investments are up a huge amount.
Yes, I'd have to
Talk a
defer
little
to
bit
Clyde to explain that one.
We must be doing something right.
Those are just revenue true-ups from our investment portfolio. And
You need to use the mic. Sorry.
the investment fees, those are just investment revenue flows from our investment portfolio. And they come in on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, and we just record them. It's nothing nothing major. It's just from our investment portfolio.
Okay. Mr. Hardy.
Sure. On that, I guess, so if this is, income from a portfolio, and the income amounted to $343,000. About how large is the portfolio then? And I guess, where does that investment portfolio fit in our overall, financial strategy? Why do we have the portfolio, for example? Is it cash management? Is it, what's?
Yeah, this is a line item that it gets charged to the electric utility, so I don't manage it, and I don't have the details behind it. It's just what we lift off of the Navline financial. So we'd have to get more detail on that
Okay.
from finance directly.
Okay, and could you just tell me the CAIC at the bottom? What is that again?
Yep, that's contribution in aid of construction, and those are fees that are paid by customers who are connecting to the system, who are required because of the nature of the connection that they're making, that they might have to make some form of payment to get that connection done. For example, if it requires a larger transformer or a larger service wire, putting something in underground, we budget that at zero because we don't know how much of it might come in.
Right.
And then if it's high, that's great. If it's low, we didn't budget for it anyway. But we want to make sure that we recover our costs when we provide those services to customers.
Okay, and contributions from enterprise funds, are those, other parts of the city paying you for what you do for them?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. Like City Hall paying its light bill.
Correct. Street
Okay.
it could be street lights. In some cases, it could be, for example, the cost of operating customer service is charged to the utility and then is reimbursed in part by the other funds that benefit. Things like that.
Okay, and on the pole attachment fees, so Comcast is reflected in this number. AT&T is not. Are there any other folks with poles that we'll be negotiating with in the future? Or that's it. Comcast, AT&T.
There's actually three, and the third is Crown Castle, and Crown Castle hasn't yet gone into service, I believe. But we've already negotiated that deal, and it's been approved, and they're in the business. They're in the process of installing their infrastructure. That's going to be roughly 35 to 40 attachments, 30 poles, and those will be what we refer to as wireless attachments. They're not wired attachments. So Comcast and AT&T are actually wires hanging on the poles, and Crown Castle is actually going to be mini cell sites on the poles.
Okay. Those are all the questions that I have for the, just one, a classification issue. The capacity revenues from that gas deal that we have,
Yes.
it's in here under operating revenue, right? And so walk me through, I guess, how we would classify that as operating revenue. Other people might call it, we have something, it's an asset. We're basically, selling our capacity to someone. Is there another way to think about that other than operating revenue?
Well, it is an operating. It truly is an operating revenue, and the way that deal works is we are holders of capacity on the Florida gas transmission system, which is seasonal capacity. We package that capacity together with gas, and we sell it as a bundle, and it's labeled PESCO. It was PESCO for part of the year, then that deal was transferred to Gas South. The parent of PESCO exited the business and sold that contract to Gas South. So we pay the expenses to maintain the capacity in FGT, and we pay the expense of procuring the gas. We bundle it, and then we sell it, and they pay for the bundled product. So we have an expense and we have a revenue, and we just put it into operating revenue.
Right. Okay. And it's not just like a financial transaction.
No,
It's
no,
a
no,
little bit
no.
more than that.
No, it's an actual product that's being procured. We work with Florida Gas Utility, which is the gas version of FMPA, if you will. We're a member, been a member for decades, and they manage this for us.
Fantastic.
And they buy the gas at an attractive price in the market, bundle it together, and then the nature of the contract is that we don't take the risk. We just sell it as a bundle product.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions for revenue.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Going back to the CAIC, is it safe to say with all the new construction, the mid, the other things that are coming online, that line item is going to be larger for the next year?
It could be larger. In the case of the mid, we may have offered to contribute.
I
To
know
that
we
on our-
did,
on
but
our
I
own,
don't
yeah.
know if there's pieces of that comes in.
Yeah. So
Or
as someone,
other development. We have a lot of development on the west side.
yes, that development, to the extent that they need something other than a standard service, that would lead to a contribution aid to construction. For example, we may have customers. We had one recently that wanted 480 volt, 400 amp service. that is outside of the norm. We'd have to pull new wire, set a new transformer to higher voltage.
What would they need that for? That was a resident?
No, that was a commercial business in the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay.
A very, very attractive customer to have come to town.
And then my other question, going back to Crown Castle, this might be a question for the attorney. Is Crown Castle the company that represents all the other little, like, the other little companies? I have Verizon, so the other little cell companies? Or where are they at the table? Why haven't we heard from, we're talking about, where's Verizon? Where is, what are some of the other cell companies? Are they all within?
Madam Mayor, I think Crown Castle is ultimately the contractor for those
small-
wireless.
That's what I thought.
That they then procure the attachment, but it could be for Verizon or some other cell phone
Some of the other
provider.
ones. Okay, because,
But probably not AT&T or Comcast.
well, AT&T and Comcast are the larger, T-Mobile.
Right, something like that.
Because I want to make sure that some of those companies aren't still out there that we haven't captured. If the question to Crown is, are you indeed the rep for, or should we start looking at the T-Mobiles and Verizons and people that may not be part of this, that are still out there somewhere that we haven't captured? Or
Well,
have we?
We do have cell towers in our territory that have meters on them. And I'm not exactly sure who they belong to, but I know that they have meters and they're getting a bill, and the bills are paid, or we'd shut them off. But they do pay.
Okay.
My understanding of Crown Castle's business model, my crude understanding was that they'll do a propagation study, if you will, determine where cellular signals might be weak in town. They identify those locations and seek to set poles in locations that are weak to provide the carriers with better coverage into those areas. That's my understanding of their business model.
Well, AT&T should really hire them because all over the city,
Point of order. Point of order.
I hear from residents on a regular basis. They have to go in the bathroom to use their phone.
Point of order. Commissioner Robinson.
Just other revenues. What's the definition of other revenues? Page 4.
Yeah, it's a combination of things that we just fold in. It could be fees. It could be bank or not bank charges, revenue. Oh, okay. Could be a sale of an asset, a sale of surplus equipment, things like that. Just something that's not a commercial, not tied to a commercial meter or a residential meter or a gas transaction or power sale. It's some other form of revenue that comes to the utility. We can get you a very detailed breakdown if you want, but it's a bit of a catch.
Less than 20,000 in increments.
It's stuff that doesn't fit neatly into another box of what you typically think that we're in, but you wind up with small revenues from places, and we just put them all over there.
Where are the deposits in this?
The deposits are not carried on the utility financials. The deposits are carried on the city's financials. We have a report on deposits later on,
Okay.
but
Why is that?
the deposit, because the deposits are for all city utility services, so it's city
Shut
water,
off
electric,
everything.
sewer, refuse, and the electric, of course.
Okay, so it's a different.
So the city has a fund balance, if you will, for deposits. We collect it because we run the customer service function, but we don't control that account.
Commissioner Robinson, were you
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. The other thing is, I'm not sure, and let me know if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure you could call that revenue. If it's something that someone gives you to hold for a period of time, and you're supposed to give it back, that would be, some kind of, I don't know.
Right. I don't believe that we can. When I'm aware that we would consider it revenue. It's held in an account. I'll use the term escrow. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but it's in a set aside account.
That's a
for
liability.
deposits. Right.
Yeah.
It's owed back to the customer, and
I
my
just
understanding is we
remember
pay interest on it.
when we were changing the processes for that, and I just remember us going after unpaid deposits or unpaid bills or whatever. That was in a separate fund that we were trying to recoup, but that
Right.
showed up before in the budget, so I didn't know
So
where that played out.
So what would happen is if a customer were to default and not pay their bill, to the extent that we have a deposit on that account, that deposit would then be used to pay the utilities.
Wait.
Then there's a liability that's owed by the customer back to the city, and that could take some time to collect if ever.
Okay. Thank you. You have something else?
Oh, no. I mean, this is really for the next slide, but
Okay.
I'll just wait.
Okay, on the expense side, obviously we can go through these in details, but we'll jump to the biggest one, is the contractual services PPA. That's the term in Naviline. That's actually our power purchase agreement, if you will, or our power purchase contracts. This is where we buy energy. This is largely driven by our need to move energy to our customers, right? So the more energy we sell to our customers, the more that we buy. We came in significantly below budget. So that's obviously, it's always good to come in below budget, right? But you have to look at that with a little bit of a skew, because you can say, well, we also sold less than we thought, right? So you bought less because you sold less. That's true. We don't produce it out of thin air. But the story that's further behind that, and we'll get into the next few slides, is while we bought less than we thought we were going to have buy for the year, we also bought it cheaper because natural gas prices were significantly lower, and they're a significant driver to our power purchase costs. So yes, it's we wish we had hit our budget for sales, therefore we would have hit our budgets for expenditures. But nonetheless, what we did buy, we bought cheaper than we planned on, and that was certainly very helpful.
Shardy.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the contractual services expense line, and I'm looking at for PESCO, and I'm looking at the PESCO revenue line. Would it be wrong of me to say that the difference in those two is our profit on that?
That's correct.
Okay, arrangement.
You're not wrong. It is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
On maintenance, what was, and I didn't see it elsewhere in the presentation unless I missed it. What was our maintenance budget and spend for the previous year, if you have it available?
Yeah, we don't have that tonight. We can certainly follow up and get that to you.
I see there's a big difference between the actual and the budget, but what was the difference between the actual and the actual, and the budget and the budget? I mean, did maintenance spend go up or down or about the same?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but we'll certainly put that together and get that to you.
Okay. I was just curious because the difference was a large one, but if it's not a difference year to year, then it doesn't really, there's not really much there. And the last thing I have to ask, because we do hear from folks who are in our union about overtime, contractual services, and things of that nature. So I get from time to time a phone call from folks in the union about us contracting out for things that our employees feel that they can do. And if you can walk me through that thought process, I would like to hear.
So generally speaking, we do contract work out, as do virtually all utilities that I'm familiar with.
Sure.
It's very difficult to maintain and self-perform all the work that you need to do. We don't have a lot of people. We only have a dozen linemen, if you will. Or sometimes we'll get up to 13 or 14, but and of those, we have a group of apprentices. Now, what happens is you can't plan on doing work with our own people, because things come up that require them to respond on overtime. And once they respond on overtime in the 8 hours preceding their normal workday, they basically get the day off with pay. Right? That's according to the contract.
Say that one more time.
If they respond in the 8 hour period prior to the start of their shift, right, they're unavailable to us during their regular shift because they're into what's called rest period. That's the contract that we have. This is not the entire reason we contract. It's just one aspect of it when it gets to being able to plan. So we use our people. They're very, very bright. They know how to fix the system. They know the system very well. So they're good first responders, if you will, and able to repair the system. They know their way around the town. They know exactly how the circuits work, how the fuses are coordinated, how to work with system ops. So they're very good at troubleshooting and repairing. When it gets into doing larger construction of projects, you need more of a construction-focused entity that has A, the tools, B, the workforce, the project management capability, the supply chain, all of the pieces necessary to undertake what we'd call linear construction projects. We're not set up well to do that. And the amount of work that we need to do to greatly improve the reliability of our system simply cannot be executed with our own workforce. And our own workforce is already working a substantial amount of overtime, as we'll go through in the next few slides. So we focus on operations and maintenance. of the system. We do some minor capital work or project work with the people that we have, but we can't commit to large projects on a schedule, for example, because we just don't know if they're going to be available, because they're also covering all of the overtime and the emergency work.
So would you say that the bulk, the vast majority of the work that we have folks on contract do for us, that you would call those your linear construction projects? So there's very little work where we're contracting out to some outside entity.
The exception would be things like vegetation management, which we don't do our own. For example, we have Davy Tree that does a lot of vegetation management, tree trimming, mowing of alleys, clearing of debris and brush, keeping the lines clear of vegetation. That's done for us. That's a big contract, and that's not executed by our people. I'm not aware that the city has ever performed that function, or it hasn't done it in many, many years. That's contracted out. But in terms of what we'd call transmission and distribution, work with wires on poles, we typically don't hire contractors to do our operation and maintenance type work. They're typically working on a large capital project.
Okay, and and that's going to remain the case going forward.
Certainly, when we look at the work that you all have approved us to budget for in the capital plan, $100 million, we couldn't execute that level of plan with our own workforce. Now, it doesn't mean that our workforce won't be trained and know how to do some of it. They're certainly they're going to take ownership of it, and they're going to operate it and maintain it for decades. But in terms of getting it built, we'll probably use outside forces for that. We've already lined up the contractors. There's contractors working every day now for months doing that large construction.
Okay, and I think this is elsewhere in the presentation, just overtime,
Yes.
year to year, up or
Yep.
down.
It's decreased significantly. Actually, T&D overtime went up 1% year over year, but it's down significantly over the past 3 years.
Eh.
And part of that has to do is changes in headcount. So the overtime percentage the dollar numbers might be driven by how many people they have out there and the size of the work crew that's called in to do the work, due to contractual obligations, and at least in one case enforced by an arbitrator's decision.
So you're saying previously, when our overtime was much higher than it is today, there were some things that we had to do under an agreement or under some sort of judgment or whatever from an arbitrator that said that we had to have crews of a certain size when doing certain work, and that affected the overtime?
No, there's a recent arbitrator's decision that disallowed a practice that we had undertaken about 6 to 9 months or a year prior, that was helping us control overtime. The arbitrator felt differently, and we're bound by the arbitrator's decision. But that's not a huge driver, but that's one of the drivers. Big thing that we did was we stopped discretionary spending on what I deemed to be unnecessary overtime, things that we were paying for in overtime that simply were not needed, as our improvements in reliability have shown that we're doing fine.
Can you give me some examples?
Lineman's rodeo was a significant one. That was virtually all overtime. All of the training and prep that was done, and the rodeo expenses themselves were significant. Riding in parades, for example, a lot of extra things that were done. We had extra trainers. We had 3 trainers for 4 apprentices. Now we use 1 trainer for 4 apprentices. Things like that.
Okay.
So what we do is we don't put off doing work. If we have an outage, we call people in to do the work. There's no question about that. And we still cover, and for example, during the hurricane or summer storm season, we put the one of the shifts on to the evening shift to spread the workforce around a little bit more, give us better coverage. So if we have outages, we work them, and we bring people in to do that.
Okay, and just my last question on this, lineman's rodeo, things of that nature, would that have accounted for the bulk of the discretionary spending that was cut in overtime over the past few years?
I don't have great detail on it, but certainly was a big number. That was $110,000.
Okay.
That event alone,
Okay.
an expense.
All right. Thank you.
Now, you mentioned the hurricane. Just a quick question. When a storm comes, whether or not it was an eventful storm or non-event, I know there's a lot of preparation that goes into making sure that regardless of how that storm is, that we're okay. So I know dollars were spent to handle a lot of those emergency things and it's showing flat across the way. How is that?
So what we do when a storm is approaching, we use our own people to get ready, to make our facilities ready, to store the equipment properly. We will put the tree crews on a what I would call more of a rapid deployment. So we'll assign a tree crew actually to the line crews, and they'll be driving around in the 5, 6, 7 days, or even 24 hours up till the storm actually hits, out there doing as much trimming of that work that they can. All of that we expense. The mutual aid crews come in separate, so they come from afar. We use our connections in the mutual aid world to get people to agree to come here from hundreds, if not thousands, of miles away to be ready to repair things. So we'll bring them in early. They're typically we typically assume about 2 days of travel for them to get here, because they're coming from pretty far away. We house them in local hotels, and the goal is to have them here before the storm actually hits. Because once the storm hits, you may not be able to get them at all because they're not available because they went someplace else.
Right.
Or the roads are impassable and the hotels are full and there's no fuel along the way. So being on a peninsula, we need to get them here early. That's one of the changes that we made with my arrival. Then they're here throughout the period of the storm until we feel that we're in the all clear, that the worst of the winds are behind us, that if we had damage, that we could repair it with our own people, and then we release them.
So what was our expenditure for that? The
Our-
storm? I mean, because we
our-
brought them in, did we not?
Yes, we did. It was in between $2.5 and $2.9 million.
And where does that show? It's not under Hurricane Dorian
It-
expenses.
It's the hurricane expense is not in here. That's in the insurance fund.
Continue, please.
This next graph is a pictorial way of seeing what power costs have done over the years. So it begins with 2016 and it goes all the way through till the end of 2020. And say, well, we're not there yet, right? Well, that's our forecast on where we're going based on our projected load and fuel prices. The big thing that you can see is when you get to the end of 18, September, October, November, that's when we were incurring higher charges. Certainly. Due to the previous contract that we had and the penalties that were associated with that. And then in January of 19, we began the new contract. And you can see that we've had a very, very steady decline of wholesale power costs. And by the end of 2020, we're forecasting that will be in the range of $55 to $60 per megawatt hour, which is substantially below where it was when we started this journey. Now, we've had a number of things helping us. We have some tailwinds here, right? Falling natural gas prices are certainly a big help, but also the basic pricing in the new contract with OUC versus the old contract with OUC is significantly better. So we got a double benefit, if you will. We got a better price contract with much better terms and conditions, but also natural gas prices have dropped significantly.
And then add our solar and once that's operational.
Our solar, Lake Worth Beach Solar 1 is up and running. It's producing 3,000 plus megawatt hours a year. It's actually producing more than it was expected to. So it has a few hiccups here and there, but nothing that would cause it to fall below its guaranteed.
No, I mean our purchase of the solar, the future contract.
Oh, I'm
of the
sorry, future
facilities.
Yes, they'll kick in sometime in calendar 23.
23.
So we'll see the benefits of those first time in calendar 24, maybe fiscally at the end of 23, but they'll come online late in 23.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
In the graph, like November, January, March, what's the upswing? Why the upswing and then back down again?
Yeah, that's periods of time when natural gas prices can spike. So
Traditionally, that's
it could be a natural gas price spike. The other thing it could be an outage. For example, we are part owners in the Stanton or St. Lucie projects, right? So when those plants are out on an outage, it could either be a planned outage, maintenance outage, or a forced outage. Anyway, if it's out on an outage, we're still making the payments. We own it. It's like having a car that broke down. It's still in the driveway, but now you have to rent a car to go to work, right? So now your expenses went up to get the same number of miles you had before. So that may cause power prices to spike. We track these by month in very, very great detail in infinite minutia to understand what our numbers are. So we look at these very, very closely. And we actually, on occasion, will catch something and get a correction in our favor. There's a few that went the other way, but we're doing a pretty good job of watching those. But if natural gas prices spike, that will bring our power price up as well, because still roughly 50% of our portfolio is tied to the price of natural gas.
Thank you.
Commissioner?
Yep. So, a few things go to zero. Natural gas has been really great for us, the direction that it's been going. To what extent are we exposed in the event the natural gas were to go the opposite direction? Are we hedged at all? Or are we just...
Did you tell him to ask that question? We just had this exact same conversation
Okay.
in my office about an hour and a half.
Okay.
I think the solar.
Very good question. Very good question. We don't hedge. We don't use any hedging in terms of energy pricing. What we hedge, though, is in the composition of our portfolio.
Sure.
So 39, 38, 40% of our portfolio is nuclear, not subject to gas. Another 8 to 10% of our portfolio is coal. There is some small gas price exposure in coal because the rail contracts to deliver the coal to the plant are actually hedged or indexed, if you will, to natural gas prices. The balance of the portfolio is natural gas, and a very small piece, which is our own solar plant. Sorry about that. That's about 0.75% of our requirement. So we budgeted at a gas price of $3.14. It's actually on the next slide.
I'm sorry, could you go back about how much of our portfolio is natural gas?
About 50% of our portfolio is tied.
50 or 15?
50.
Yeah.
Yeah. About 50% of our portfolio is tied to natural gas.
And what will it be with the new solar?
When we bring FMPA Solar 1 and FMPA Solar 2, that will drop by about 14, 15, 16%. So points. So it'll drop to like 35%ish, thereabouts, depending on how much our load has grown by then and how the other units perform in each year. But generally speaking, we're going to go from about a 0.7% of our power coming from solar to about 15+% in that range coming from solar when those projects come online. That will cut into the amount that would have come either from natural gas and from coal to some extent. So the solar prices in the marketplace are getting to the point where they're competing with coal and natural gas. And they're, if you will, must-run resources. The sun comes out, they start producing, you take that power. And they're obviously very, very low operating cost. So to your question on hedging, we don't hedge. When we bring the additional solar resources online in mid to late 23, our dependence on natural gas will drop significantly. We did budget at $3.14, and as you can see from the graph on gas prices, what they've done, the solid line going across is what we budgeted. Now I can't disclose the formula, but that we cranked those numbers through to show you how we calculate the power price, because that's confidential to OUC. But I can tell you that it's driven by natural gas, and as the natural gas prices have come down throughout the year, that's a spot gas price at the Henry Hub. It does lower the cost of power under that contract.
So that was what we budgeted at last year. What are we budgeting?
Well, for fiscal 20,
Right.
We're budgeted at 314. So this is.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
What were we budgeted for last year? Was it the same?
I think it was around 325, 322.
Okay. All right. So we've got some room between where gas is and where our budget is. And
Yes.
I guess, even 314 is less than what natural gas was, several years ago. And so if things were to reverse course, how comfortable are we with, I guess, at that point, that would be 35% of our portfolio increasing in cost.
Well, we'd increase back up. If it went back up to the budget price, we're back up to where we budgeted to be.
And if it increased,
Yeah. The same amount, if it increases as much as it previously had decreased, then it would erase any gains that we had.
Okay.
So we could sustain some excursion on the upside before we had a problem,
Okay. All right. Thank you.
assuming that our sales were constant, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Which is, it's just, something I think about. It's hard to imagine what
Yeah.
is going to happen.
There's been some events in the marketplace and internationally, for example, that the thought was that it would spike oil prices and natural gas prices because it's a commodity that follows. They price not necessarily to parity, but they follow each other very well. That would cause fuel prices to spike. It didn't happen, and a big part of the thinking on that in the trade press is that's because of the tremendous amount of natural gas that is in storage in this country. but also the ability to extract gas is greatly improved over many years ago. So if you actually look at one of the things that we follow in the industry is something called a rig count, which is the number of rigs that are actually out there drilling.
Yeah.
And the number of rigs is at one level, but the gas production has gone up dramatically.
Right.
So there's far more production out of existing rigs without having to punch new holes in the earth. So we're getting a lot of gas in the marketplace, which is holding the gas prices down.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Shall we?
So we'll move on to the salary and overtime report. So on the far right here, we see the fiscal 17 numbers, and we've broken these out by department. So we show the salary number, the overtime number, and then the total, and we also show the amount that's associated with overtime as a percentage. So you can see that in fiscal 17, we paid out 1.397, almost 1.4 million in overtime. In fiscal 19, we cut that to 760,000. So we cut it significantly. Total payroll or salary went from 5.3 million to 5.214. So we've got better paid people in terms of salaries. We have fewer people. We had one reduction, but we haven't had a significant reduction. We've done some work through attrition. So we've held the line very well on base salary, total base salary, but we've significantly cut the amount of overtime. And then we look within each department to see what the overtime rates were actually running at. Some of these are exorbitant in the industry. You'd be concerned about having people working sustained, months and months and months, if not a year or more, at very high levels of overtime. That means that they're not getting much rest. They're not going home a lot. So if you go back to 2017, let's just pick any one of those. We got one group at 43% overtime in 2017, one group. Mm-hmm. That amount of money was largely about a dozen people, maybe 10. So if you imagine that you're working a 5-day week, and then when you're working 40+% overtime, when did you go home? When did you get some good rest, right? And our folks are doing very dangerous work at that, right? They're working with live conductors at 4,000 volts or 26,000 volts. So it's important that they be well rested. But we did control the overtime. That was reduced to 28% last year and then 29% in the most recent fiscal year. So there's still a healthy amount of overtime that's being worked. When I see these numbers at a very high level for sustained period of time, you look at it from 2 points of view. First, are we working things that we need to be working on overtime? So we have to ask the question, does this really need to be worked on overtime, or can it be worked on straight time? If after you're done asking those questions and managing to that for some period of time, the numbers are still high, you would ask yourself the question, do I have the right number of people? Very high levels of overtime sustained over a long period of time, if it's all being worked on stuff that has to be worked, then you might not have the right number of people. You might need more people. I'm not there yet. I know that we have more apprentices in the pipeline, so we'll have more linemen in about 11 months. So right now we're running 29%. Now what we don't have in front of us is the first quarter of fiscal 20, right? That'll be the next time we meet. We have another meeting on that, right? And we'll see how we're doing. We look at this number every single month. Clyde knows it's one of the first things I ask for, and he's calling finance. Ed wants this number. He wants the numbers right away because we're trying to manage our expenses and understand what we're asking the workforce to do. What I can say about the workforce, they've been very, very dedicated and very responsive. When we need them, in the middle of the night, middle afternoon, a Saturday or Sunday at 2 o'clock in the morning because there's a lizard on the wire or a raccoon or a car hit a pole, they respond, and they respond very well. As a matter of fact, the response has been improving over where it was in prior years. So they're doing great work for us, and they earn their overtime, and they're doing a good job. So the overall value here is to show that we are controlling the expenses. Now, as we've weeded out the discretionary work and we focus on what really has to be done, what really adds value to reduce outage rates and operate safely, these numbers eventually will start to turn around, right? Because we've actually done salary increases in here. We did a retroactive and a new rate increase, and we got our linemen better paid. So there'll come a point where we start to bottom out and start to turn, and it'll start to go back up. But we know that we've eliminated, a lot of things that we don't need to be doing, and we're doing the right things. So these numbers get into much more detail than month by month residential sales and commercial sales. I don't know that we need to go through them in a lot of detail, but it just shows where the variances are to budget. On the right-hand side, you'll see the track that we use, and we've developed this over time. Clyde calls this I think he calls it the crocodile curve, because it kind of looks like a crocodile, poking its head up as it dips down, and the head comes up and the eyes come up above the water. But this is illustrative of what we have to work with when we set the budget. So now, not too many months from now, we'll be working on the fiscal 21 budget. We're not yet done with fiscal 20, but we're going to take a guess into what fiscal 21 is going to look like. So when we do this forecasting, we don't yet have the benefit of the full year. So we have to look at prior years. We have to look at the number of housing starts, if you will, that we've had, developments underway, the trend, the pattern. Is it going up or down or flat, and forecast ahead. So we've gotten a lot better at it. This is tightening up, and we're improving at this. And I said earlier today, if you ever get it 100% right, it was probably my mistake, because I don't know you could perfectly forecast the future, but you can better forecast the future, and that's what we're trying to do: forecast a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. And the following slide after that is the same thing on the commercial side, and you can see that the commercial side, we really over budgeted. We expected much more commercial sales than were actually materialized. So it just didn't happen on the commercial side. That was a big lag. But in spite of all of that, we still did better than the prior year and had a healthy year. We still had growth.
Do the commercial rates, have anything to do with
Our
sales?
commercial rates are generally higher than the surrounding utilities. It would be hard for me to because I haven't done the study, to go ask all of the commercial customers or some segment of them and say, why did you not grow, or why did you close? Was it because of our rates, or was it because of something else? And it'd be hard for me to pinpoint that. But generally speaking, I think if you have lower rates, you'd probably have more customers or more sales. But is it a one-to-one correlation? It's hard for me to say.
Are we working on a study of competitiveness, as in increasing sales? Would, if we became more competitive, would we actually profit more?
I think that the simple answer would be yes. The more difficult answer is, well, what would it take? Could the electric utility on its own do that? So would more people open businesses here or move here just because our electric rates were a little bit lower? Or would it be taxes? Would it be schools? Would it be,
Lower rent rate.
Rents, for example, in the commercial sector? Would it be, safety?
It's always a combination.
Right, but
But-
electric has to be a part of it, right? It's a part of the puzzle that we own, right? And the benefit of having a municipal-owned utility is that we have control of it, right? Because we can do things with electric utility to help spur growth, and we can do things outside of the electric utility to help spur growth of the utility. So it's a good relationship. The good thing in Lake Worth is that we have both sides of the equation. We're all 22 sides of the equation, however many there are here.
One of the hardest things that I've heard in the commercial sector is that not so much on the mega users of electric in the community. In fact, they saw those rates come down as we lowered rates. They saw them come down close to 20% or whatever it was when we started lowering the residential side and we worked some on the commercial side. They noticed a drop there. It's the small business owner that notices the person, the convenience store owner with 1,000 square feet paying $3,000 or $3,000 because they've got refrigeration units and all kinds of stuff in their small square footage that can't understand the difference. I think it's the little guys in the commercial sector that complain the most that I run into than the larger users of electric. And I don't know if there's a way to do something with that for the smaller businesses or
Well, one of the things
by
first,
square footage or something like that.
the first thing we need to do is do a good, solid cost of service study, which will be coming to you probably in February to talk more
Okay.
about.
Oh, good.
The next thing that we need to do is to really understand how we stack up versus the others. The other utilities in the area have very, very complex rate schedules. So it's very hard to make gross categorizations of customers. there's so many different tariff options that you can go under in the other utility. So to compare our 3,000 and figure out, well, how do they slot in? So an easy one, for example, is to say, well, I have a 1,000 kilowatt hour residential customer. That's a no-brainer, or a 1,200 kilowatt hour residential customer per month. That's a very easy comparison. But when you get into the intricacies of commercial customers, which also in some cases have a demand meter, not just a consumption meter, but either they're demand and consumption or pure consumption, and depending on the kW of demand that they're at, they could be in different ratings. That's a very difficult comparison. I know that the statewide report that FMEA publishes does show us as more expensive than competitors, but it's hard for me to pinpoint for let's say an 800 square foot storefront. How do they compare in territory A versus territory B? It's very hard to do, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't try to do it.
I would be very interested in that, just because I'm in the business community so often, and I'd really like to be able to talk more eloquently on that and see what our goals and desires are for that.
Right. So one of the things we've done on the residential side, for example, is we actually have some employees who volunteer to bring their bill in if they live in the other utility territory.
I could probably, in the Dixie Highway corridor and the businesses there, be able to find people in different types of building scenarios.
That would be very helpful, so we can do some apples, as close as possible, do some apples to apples comparisons as to what they're paying.
People that have more office related businesses, people have more retail related businesses, to see their different usages and what equipment they actually have in their 800 or 1,000 square feet. Okay.
So generally speaking, my impression is that the use of electricity is growing because we've actually grown year over year, and our customer count is growing slowly, but electrification is improving. So, and there's a lot of speculation to where electric vehicles are going to go for us. So I'll touch on that for a second. We have purchased some electric vehicle charging stations, and we do intend to put them in the commercial areas of town. So there'll be some in the downtown area, there'll be some at the beach, and there'll be some at the golf course, places where people can then visit. They'll be there for a few hours, long enough to get a little bit of a charge. And while they're there, they're going to do something. I hope they're not just sitting in the car waiting to get a charge, that they actually go have lunch, or go have dinner, go shop, use the downtown, use the beach, use those resources. So they'll have to pay for the charge, and we'll be coming to you, ask for an approval on a rate. So we're not going to ask for that tonight, but we are doing those to bring something into that commercial community. So we're doing something to bring people to you on the part of the city.
Excellent. Commissioner Robinson.
The charging stations, I love. Park of Commerce, is that a consideration to have on private property for a large area?
In terms of charging stations at the Park of Commerce?
Yes.
Well, those entities, they could certainly put charging stations in their own storefront. So we have to find a place where we think there's going to be enough traffic to justify having it. So the Park of Commerce, there's a lot of buildings which are big warehouses, which have a lot of big trucks that come and go all day long, and they're not yet electric on those big trucks. But the employees at those work locations could certainly charge. So we'd have to find a way to get charging stations there.
And they would be ours or theirs?
I would prefer that they be theirs.
Yeah.
But we're trying to put charging stations in places where, for example, residential customers and passenger vehicles would be able to charge. So part of the value proposition, kind of jumping ahead to when we talk about charging, but part of the value proposition that we want to offer customers is, instead of them having to put a charging station in at home, which could cost them $500 or more, they can avail themselves of a charging station in town and pay the same to charge their car on a kilowatt hour basis if this body approves the rate that they would pay at home, tie it to the residential rate.
But I'm thinking of a couple buildings on Boutwell that have several different businesses, and have we encouraged, or will we encourage a charging station there?
We have not gone out and gone door to door to convince them to put charging stations in. Now, I know that in other utility service territories there are efforts with much bigger, much more sophisticated entities that have marketing departments that go out and convince employers to put charging stations in for their employees. We simply haven't. We don't have the resources to do that in terms of time that it takes and people that it takes to go do that.
To knock on the door?
It's something that we would like to do in the future, yes. But it's also an expensive thing to do, to add a charging station. So you really want to be very, very strategic about it, because if you start having to break up sidewalks, pour concrete, or run wire any significant distance, the cost to put the charging station can jump up pretty quickly. The locations that we've selected are locations that already have a transformer nearby, very, very small amount of construction, where we can jump in very quickly.
I will say many of the cities that I've gone to, because the TPA has been rotating around to different city halls throughout Palm Beach County for our meetings. They've built in, but they're all the cities, of course, that have like the megalopolis city hall compound with their fire and rescue and all of those other types of things. But they have
Next year.
charging stations built into there.
What I see at the very kind of at the beginning of the charging, unless you charge a lot for charging, it's hard for it to be a profit enterprise. You have to get a lot of turnover, and you have to charge a high rate. What we're offering here is a value-added service to our commercial community to bring more traffic to them and bring them more value for being here. And the customers will hopefully come and charge here.
Sort of like an amenity.
Correct.
Vice Mayor?
I just wanted to make a comment. I saw Wawa was putting in charging stations at their location. So I know we have one here on the end of Lake Worth Road in Congress. So
Right. And I believe, I'm not sure if they actually charge for those. They might be free. But if for example, let's say, okay, there's a new donut place in town, right? Or Dunkin' Donuts, obviously. Would they want somebody tying up a parking spot for 3 or 4 hours to charge, right? How many cups of coffee and how many donuts are they going to buy in 3 or 4 hours? Or they probably want to see that spot turning over rapidly,
Absolutely.
right? So you have to think about the economics of that. So if somebody's going to charge for 15 minutes while they run in and get a cup of coffee, how much did they really charge?
But if you're there for 8 hours,
Right. For
in the
example,
Park
they
of
go to the
Commerce.
beach, enjoy a day at the beach, right?
Or at
play
the
around
Park of Commerce.
the golf course, or have a lunch or dinner downtown and walk the streets and then come back to your car. Enjoy yourself.
The charging market's pretty well understood by the players that are in it, and they have the different categories of stations. You'll find the high-speed chargers, which are trying to replace gas stations near interstates and travel corridors, and then your destination chargers like at the beach or shopping malls and places in your corridors. And we've talked about how to get the homeowners to jump into that market, because we would rather sell them electrons at night than them going to a gas station and buying gas. And those kinds of strategies are something we're discussing it. But this is a great first foray, I can't even talk, into this arena with where Ed's heading with this. And we'll pick up as we go, but getting these initial chargers out is real important.
Foray.
Vice Mayor?
Foray, that's
well, and along those lines,
segue.
as owning our own utility, would it not be beneficial to us to look into some kind of system where we actually market and or sell to our local residents that want to, because that's bringing more value to our system. And, if they're going to charge somewhere, they should be charging at home overnight. Where,
Package it up.
Putting money back into our system, and they're, investor-owned utility.
Correct. We need to take a look at that. The economics, though, frankly, are difficult, right? So us to say, okay, so if we put let's say we make a $500 investment in giving a customer a charger or contribution towards their cost of installing a charger, and they would have to use an awful lot of electric for us to get a reasonable payback on that charger. But that's certainly something that we're going to look at. We're also going to look at, I'm not saying that we're going to do it, but we at least want to be conversant in what would happen if we had a special overnight rate. For example, a relatively low rate for people who would charge their vehicles overnight. But what we don't want to do is to take the load that the revenues that we make during the daytime and shift those all to night and wind up making a lot less money than we made, and then we made the investment in chargers too. So we need to offer them a value for doing something, for adding load to our system, not just shift the load, because our economics are based on the current, if you will, profile of usage.
Yeah, you were going into my question, right? So let's imagine, which I don't foresee in the near future, but let's imagine substantially high percentage of the population starts driving electric vehicles. What does that do to the load profile, the curve of demand, right? Which typically people wake up in the morning, lots of demand. They go home at night, lots of demand. Not a lot of demand during the day for residential customers. Not a whole bunch at night. Does that change, and does that change our revenue profile, or does it just shift things around?
It helps us from a revenue point of view, but in the short term, it could create a problem. So we have sections of the city that are on the 4 kV system, which is already operating at or near its capacity, and we do things to try to move customers over to the adjacent 26 kV. But let's assume that we finished the 4 kV upgrade to 26 kV. Now we have all of the capacity that we need to deliver kW to people. Now, you would generally think that the bulk of the charging will happen overnight. But what happens is, and having driven an electric car on and off for a number of years, I don't drive one right now, but I've driven one for quite a bit, is you plug it in when you park it. It starts charging. So unless you deliberately program it to start charging in the evening, if you get home at 4, 5, 6 o'clock and plug it in, that's when it's going to start charging. We hit our coincidental, what's called a coincidental peak, which is our peak coincidental with all of the other utilities on the transmission system, sometime between, let's say, 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the evening. So, and our charges for transmission services are built by the peak that we hit on a coincidental basis with everybody else. So what we've done is we've increased our coincidental peak, therefore increased our cost, but we're not getting more on a unit basis. We increase our cost, but we're not getting more for the unit of electricity. Where it would really be helpful if the car was programmed to begin charging at 8 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night and be fully charged by 7 o'clock in the morning when you want to get back in it and go to work. So overnight charging would be great. Charging during the day is better than no charging at all, but we would get far more margin, if you will, if they were charging overnight. And then the question is, do you offer an incentive to cause the behavior to shift the load to that time of day? Things like that.
And if you offer an incentive, does it
Doesn't work.
destroy the incentive to offer the incentive?
Exactly.
The dog
All
case.
right.
I think one of the things that there's, and everybody wants something, right? I'm certainly one of those, right? But I want to point out for the electric vehicles, you're already getting more for your money in terms of the fuel out of an electric vehicle than you would out of a gasoline vehicle. So the distance that you would travel on $1 of gasoline, you'll do for 40 cents or 45 cents on electricity.
Does that include battery replacement over?
It does not. That's just the operating cost. But having said that, and having been involved with a large fleet of vehicles, batteries should go into hundreds of thousands of miles. Battery replacement. If you have a car that goes 200,000 miles or goes to the point where it actually needs a battery replacement, you did a great job. You got a lot of miles out of that car.
Okay.
These batteries have been in service in the hybrid fleet, the hybrid vehicles for a decade or more. Most notably, for example, New York City taxi cabs, which went hybrid many, many years ago. Not unusual to see them go hundreds of thousands of miles on these batteries and without significant issues. And the fleet that I happen to have been involved with, I can't remember in probably 1,000 plus vehicles that were just on batteries, hybrids, of having any problems. It just wasn't the case.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Robinson?
When do you see us putting an electric charge on a gas tax?
So I think what you're alluding to is an industry debate that's happening, or actually it's not necessarily the industry, it's happening politically, is that the states are collecting, they feel that they're losing on the gas tax because more and more vehicles go electric. So some states are beginning to quantify that and adjust for that through increased registration fees, perhaps, for electric vehicles. I don't know that that's being considered in Florida. It's certainly something that's in the background.
They haven't consulted you.
No, they haven't. I do have a lot of unread emails. There might be one in there. But I can understand the issue.
All right, ready?
It's a good discussion. Now we get into the scorecard a little bit. So if we look at the top two lines, residential sales and commercial sales, and go over to the right, and there's a column that says year-to-date variance to prior year. So line 1 and line 2, the column says year-to-date variance to prior year. So you can say that our residential sales were up a little over $1 million, so call that $1.09 or $1.1 million over the prior year. So even though we didn't hit the budget for residential sales, we still grew over the prior year. Commercial sales shrank by $30,000. That's really a rounding error when you're talking about millions, but we would like to see that grow. But there's, you can see, so the decrease.
I'm sorry. I'm struggling to understand. What are the periods for each? When it says September, is that the 12 months preceding September?
This is looking at fiscal year.
Okay.
Strictly fiscal 18 versus fiscal 19. It's a little confusing with the way the columns are labeled because we also do a month-to-month comparison.
Okay.
So in the columns to the left, we're looking at September of 18, and then we look at September of 19. We look at year-to-date 18 and year-to-date 19.
So that's a month.
Yes.
Okay.
So
And
we use these scorecards for different reasons because I look at this very closely month by month by month.
okay.
But what we're focusing on tonight, because I don't know that you wanted to go through the detail of monthly numbers, you really want to look at the end of the year number and say, where did we end up the year? We sold $1 million of more stuff to our residential customers than we did in the prior year, even though it was less than we had budgeted to. And on the commercial side, we didn't grow at all. We sold basically the same amount that we had in the prior year, but we were well below budget. So we had forecasted that group to grow, and they didn't.
Vice Mayor?
I just wanted to comment on the $30,000 that you lost. That was me, Kilwins, and Starbucks. I just did a little quick calculation on what I was paying. And, there's your $30,000.
And the good news is, even though you bought a lot less, what you did buy, we paid less for because natural gas prices were down. So,
So there.
yeah.
So there.
If we go all the way down the page to line 10, you begin to see the story. Year-to-date variance to prior year, our purchase power costs are down by $7.1 million in the city's finances. Again, this needs to be reconfirmed when we audit the books to make sure that's truly the case. Some of this has to do with when we post things, but there's still a significant drop in power costs. The next page, line 16 and line 17, far right-hand corner, you'll see that our residential kilowatt hours actually went up significantly. And as you know, the revenue went up and the kilowatt hours went up. Actually, kilowatt hours go up first and revenue follows. The commercial kilowatt hours went down and the revenues went down.
Robinson?
So can we focus on the commercial market to benefit, to your benefit?
Sure, I'd like to see more sales regardless of what sector they're in. Growth is the key to helping fund a lot of the things that we want to do in terms of reliability improvements and improved service. So more sales in a business where other than our cost of fuel, our infrastructure cost is there, but we need more commerce, right? We need more meters out there spinning. One of the good things about Lake Worth Beach is that setting aside our system and reliability improvement projects, we're a dense system where we have wires on virtually every street and every corner of the territory. So our cost to capture the next customer is relatively low. We don't have to, go a mile to go get them. We're going to go 50 feet or 100 feet to go get them. So that's one of the good things. The cost to capture is low. How to actually get those commercial businesses to take the paper down off the windows and light up again and start turning the air conditionings and serving customers and showing their wares. That's hard for the electric utility to do. That's really more on you, right?
That's why I asked.
So what you're saying is that when someone builds a residential unit in the city, that's good for
And
you.
the
And there's a meter attached to that.
CRA.
Anytime anybody sets a meter, that's good for us all collectively because we collect more revenue to cover our costs.
Hey, now,
Create more margin.
did meters grow very much from that fiscal year 18 to fiscal year 19?
I don't know that we have that actual number here, but I can certainly get it. They went up slightly, not a huge jump. We generally
Just to get behind the difference in kilowatt hours.
it's typically around 0.5%, 0.3 to 0.5%, 0.7% in that range. At times, when we're doing budgeting, we start out with thinking maybe it'll grow 1%, and we say no, let's budget something lower. So 0.3 to 0.7%. I can get the exact number that we grew in terms of meter numbers.
So people actually used more power, probably,
Yeah, actually,
which is kind of weird.
um,
Given everything's becoming more energy efficient.
That's a very good question. I've actually given that some thought, and I speculate as to what it might be. Certainly, as energy efficiency came in, whether we drove it or not, it doesn't matter. It came in. So if you're replacing a light bulb today, you can't buy another incandescent bulb. You're probably buying an LED or certainly the squiggly one, or maybe an LED. So if you're buying a new refrigerator today, it's going to be much more efficient than the old refrigerator. So unless you took the old one and put it in the garage and filled it with beer, and you have the new one inside the house, you're probably using less electric, right? Everything in the house, the HVAC system is going to use less energy today than the one you replaced that you installed 15 years ago. What I think has happened, this is pure speculation, that as the economy improves and households become more prosperous. Maybe they're adding another TV set. Maybe they're adding a clothes dryer,
Instapot.
Instapot, a Keurig. Or they're adding more things to the home than they would have before. That's
Digital
It's otherwise in
speculation.
digital devices,
More-
charging stations.
Yeah,
all-
exactly. Good point. Very good point. Yeah, more computers, more iPads, more Game Boys. More things that the kids are playing with.
Security systems,
Yeah.
everything, cameras, all kinds of things.
Right.
An extra room on the
Yeah.
house.
Or correct, an extra room on the house. Right?
Okay. We can analyze that.
Really?
So there's a lot of stuff on these things. We put them up here. Certainly we can drill down in great detail, but I want you to have a sense that we are now, measuring and analyzing data at a much greater clip than we ever were before. Really understanding what's driving this business and where the causal factors are on cost, for example.
That's it.
So one of the things that we see here, for example, is the degree days were up 5.7% over the prior year. So you'd say, well, if degree days were up, wouldn't you have expected the load to be up much higher? I would. Jason Bailey from System Operations actually put forth a really great thought, which we're actually now going to go back and plot. He said, it's great that we have more degree days, but if we go from 1 inch of rain one year to 10 inches of rain in the following year's same month, that increased rainfall has a great cooling effect on the home, cools the attic, therefore greatly reduces the need to air condition the home. So even though you have more degree days, you've dumped more heat because of rain. That's his theory. So we're actually now going to go back. I've asked our team to go back and plot inches of rainfall next to degree days to see if there's any correlation at all to what's happening and our residential load to see if it's tying together at all.
Well, it's amazing having moved this last year and having a house that had all gas appliances in it to a house that has all electric appliances in it, with the differences in the rate.
Right.
On a smaller house with all electric to a larger house with all gas.
So on the flip side of this, one could say, well, what are you going to do next, Ed? Change the weather? No, I'm not, right? The
Why
weather,
not,
the
Ed?
weather is, I could try, but solar will help us do that. But in all seriousness, we can't control the weather, but at least having a good understanding of the causal factors behind our profitability, especially at the margin, is important because we live and die at the margin in terms of our budgets, right? The base energy is not moving a lot, but we're budgeting to get that extra bit of revenue at the margin to be able to afford that next level of system improvement, capital, debt service. So it's important to us to understand it. Next slide. The biggest story here is in the top is street. This is largely about street light. So a few years ago, we didn't have a strong focus on the availability of the street light fleet. We're now very keenly focused on it. This time last year, at the end of 18, we were at 96.7% availability. And yes, we do track availability of the fleet. We know how many lights we have. We do our drive-bys, our routes. The operators are driving around at night looking, checking lights, and we're up to 98.1%. 87 out for repair versus 145 the prior year. And these numbers change every week. The big thing is the amount of time it's taking to do the repairs. So when we started measuring this, it was taking us little over 8 days to do the repair once we found out about it. Now we've reduced that to 3 days. So we're measuring and improving and reporting. So we focus on these types of things. We could also see some things that are coming down. For example, energy conservation audits. There's less and less of a demand for conservation audits from our customers. But we still have our folks, and we redeploy them to do other things, and they're still capable of doing the conservation audit. So if a customer wants it, certainly we help them do it. Meter tampering is down. I'd like to think that actual meter tampering is down, and not just that we find less of it. Although we do find some doozies out there. There's some great stories of things
Joel's
that
got
we
some.
find. Yes, Joel's got some great ones. Customer disconnects. Hate to see this, but customer disconnects were up. Now, customers could be getting disconnected because they couldn't get to the payment to customer service in time to pay the bill. Now they really have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, not just business hours during business days to get to pay the bill. And I tell people, listen, if you're on vacation in Oregon and you want to pay your Lake Worth Beach bill, walk into a 7-Eleven or a Family Dollar and pay your Lake Worth bill. You don't need to wait till you come back. And we kind of say that, jokingly, but there's people who will come in. We've explained this to them. They said, "Really? I could do that? I was on vacation. I couldn't get here. That would be great to be able to do that." Those are for the people that are want to come in and pay with cash. So maybe some of those disconnects will go down. We hate to see people disconnected, right? We hate to see people in financial distress, and then we hate to lose the customer. It's not fun to disconnect somebody. It's a low point of the day. Net metered customers and our purchases from the solar industry or solar customers are growing, and we're going to go into that a little bit more detail. Flip to the next slide. Payment methods by customers. This is illustrative. There's a lot of good information here. One of the big numbers, like all the way down to almost the bottom box or next to the bottom box, it says walk-ins. Number of transactions. So you can see that the number of transactions from walk-ins is between, let's say, 4,000 to 4,700 customers a month that are walking in to pay us with cash, a check, or a credit card. We don't add any value in those transactions. It consumes the time and resources of the staff from being able to work with customers who have a real problem, who are trying to get an account turned on or account turned off, change a name on the account, resolve a billing problem. They don't understand the bill. We want to take that time and focus on them, not just on taking an envelope with cash and giving them a receipt. So they can go do that someplace else. We're going to focus on serving the customers who are really in help of need to resolve an issue. There's a question.
Sorry, just a note to the residents out there on the last slide. What was really remarkable to me is 58 lights is 2%, right? Like you improved by 58 lights. And I think the average person would hear 58, right? From 145 out of service to 87 out of service. Oh my gosh, large number. That's like 2% of what we have out there. And so what happens is folks in the community notice a light out on their street, right? It's a major problem for them for various reasons. They feel less safe. For different reasons, it's a major problem. The perception builds that there's a major problem in the system or in the management of the system, when in reality, that one light is an infinitesimally small number of the total number of lights in the system, and that we're actually doing a decent job. Now, I am the last person to well, I won't go there. What I'll say is there's room to improve. Always. But this is one case in which residents should maybe have a little empathy and understand that we're pretty darn good at this. There might be some issues in different places. I know in Vernon Heights, in my district, we've had conversations about some lights out there and in other places, but we're pretty darn good, and we're getting better. That's all I wanted to point out.
So I'll add to that. When we started this program of really getting after streetlight outages, we had, I believe, about 840 or 830 lights that were out, and this was at the end of 17, going into January of 18, I believe. And we really launched a major effort. We started with getting a contractor in to fix a whole bunch of them,
Yep.
and then when we got it down to a manageable level, we've been trying to keep up with it with our own folks. So that has dropped dramatically. It's going from 800 something down to where we are today. The other thing that we did was a number of things. We asked our night troubleman, that's the person who drives around, who's on the property outside of normal working hours. We actually have a crew that's in a truck ready to answer trouble calls. We've asked that truck, that person, to actually be on the move as much as possible at night, and we actually have grids or routes that they drive looking for street lights out of service. We don't necessarily expect them to fix them in the middle of the night by themselves, but we want it logged so that it can be fixed the next day. So we're utilizing them to identify that. The other thing that's happened is I think people are, I hope they're using the website more. We have the ability on the website for people to go right on the website or to call in by phone and report a street light outage. We prefer that they not call the five of you or Michael, but we know that they do, or email you, because that functionality is already on the website, and that we'd rather they do it that way. But it's there. We'd rather they not wait till a month later and say, oh, a month ago this light's been broken for a month. Really, you waited a whole month to tell me, or report it. If you would let us know, it could be that they don't expect that we would actually fix it, or B, that they weren't aware that we actually had these processes in place. So that's getting better over time. And we'll build a new normal, which is you should be able to report it and you should be able to expect that we'll fix it within a few days. If we can't fix it, ask us why we couldn't fix it. It could be because we didn't have the parts and we're waiting for another shipment of lights. Interesting, if you look near the top here, in the 40 to 45%, 50% of our transactions are by credit card. In the 30 some odd percent of the transactions are by check. Cash at the local office. So at about 12% of our customers, 12, 13, 11%, very, very constant, we're coming in to pay in cash. And those are the people, we've all been down there to see it, that are, struggled and really rushed to get there in time before that door closes because they wanted to pay so that they wouldn't be cut off. And sometimes they might be, dragging their kids along, pushing a stroller, or they just got paid and they're running over to pay that bill. They don't need to come to customer service anymore. They can go to any of those payment locations, again, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and just pay that bill. And we've helped Franco, who runs customer service, who is here, and his team have done a great job. He's been in the lobby of the building every day of this month, physically with his team, taking customers' cell phones and downloading the barcodes and doing it in a bilingual manner. So we have Spanish. Franco's Spanish has improved greatly in the last 28 days, and really walking these customers through it. And they virtually all have smartphones, and really helping them. And some of them are amazed that they can pay anywhere. And it took time for them to really, I think, yeah, that's a good idea. Even though we tried for months to get them to do it, when we had the final cutoff, now they're doing it, and they're on their way.
Good job.
Reliability, we've talked a lot about this, the definitions, but the system average frequency of interruptions, so we have 39% plus percent lower frequency of interruptions, and the durations are down almost 40%. And the length of the average outage is down by 28%. So LBAR, that last number on the right, is one that we look to a lot. We beat a lot of other utilities in that category. That is in great part by the talent of our IBW workforce that knows how to go get those lights back on quickly. And they do respond in the middle of the night. They'll show up. They get a full crew. They'll come in. They've greatly improved that number. That's due in large part to their efforts. Net metering. Before we move on to the website story, we'll just touch on net metering. We're not asking you to do anything on net metering. I'm sorry.
Before we move on, can we talk about the barcode a little bit?
Yes.
So if I don't have a barcode, and now there's no one in there that I really can go in, do I have to sit and wait and to get a barcode?
Yes, you can still come there and get the barcode if you've managed to lose it or didn't have it previously. But
Well, for instance, I have two different utilities I pay.
Mhm.
One I was able to get a barcode for, the other one I have not. So if I don't have one, what's the easiest way? I have to go in, take a number, and wait to be serviced, just like I would be turning on a utility?
No, you don't have to take a number. There's a special booth when you come in the waiting room. That representative, bilingual, is dedicated to helping customers not wait in line and just get a barcode.
Just get a barcode. Now, if I were to go to one of these pay near me locations without a barcode, could I walk in with my utility bill?
Not yet. That's phase two.
Phase two, the barcodes will actually be printed on your utility bill, and there's different barcodes for different vendors that you would go to pay to.
Okay. And how soon will that barcode be on my utility bill?
3 to 6 months. We're waiting for work on that.
Okay.
Commissioner Hardy?
He just for the record, can Ed repeat what he said so that the folks at home can hear it?
He did. I'm sorry.
It just wasn't on him.
Yeah.
Oh, no, Ed did some.
There was a-
some-
yeah, there was-
Yeah, I'll introduce Franco Bolito,
But the bit about the booth, which I think is
our
very
customer
helpful.
service manager.
Oh,
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah, that's very helpful.
For the record, Franco Bolito, Customer Service Manager. So to answer the question, Commissioner Amoroso, Vice Mayor Amoroso, there is a dedicated customer service representative who is bilingual, that when you walk into the waiting room, that's all they do. So you don't have to take a number, you don't have to wait in line. And so we're providing that service to any customer that comes in right now that has difficulty, needs education, or any assistance.
And bilingual, it's in English and Spanish.
Correct. We also have a Creole representative that's there to help the Haitian population. So we're
unless
putting
there's a
ourselves
line-
out.
Unless there's a line for the barcodes, they'd have to wait online. They'd have to take a number to wait online on the line.
And then the second question was putting the barcodes on the bill. So we're actually working with our vendor. We expect it to be within the next 3 to 6 months. All the barcodes will be printed on the paper bills.
Yeah, because for instance, I drop my check. I still use a check. I drop my check in the box. But if I'm somewhere and I'd like to pay my bill, if I have my bill with the barcode, it makes it very convenient.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I know, right?
Well, one of the things that we learned, or a few things that we learned in this process, is that it's not as intuitive as it seems. So we have a surprising amount of people who pay in cash who come in to pay that don't have their bill, and they're not sure of their address, or may not be sure of whose name the account is in, but they know they're there to pay the bill. We've had folks where we help them download onto their smartphone, and who think that they can only pay by smartphone if they're standing in the lobby of the building. So I think we take for granted the technological advancement of folks, and also the language barrier to have them understand. No, you don't have to use it on the phone here, which you would think there's some apps that you might have at home, for example, that just run while you're on Wi-Fi in your home. Trying to have everybody understand all of this is not always as simple as it sounds. So there will be somebody there that if you've lost your barcode, you're just unsure of the process, even though you've been through it once or twice before, you want to pay your bill, we'll help you out.
Well, for instance, I had a resident last month come to me. She wanted to pay her next door neighbor's utility bill unanimously. And she said, can I just go down and tell them anonymously, unanimously, anonymously?
Yes.
It's already late. And she said, can I just go down and give the address? Really couldn't,
Franco also ran across one instance where a customer went with the barcode to a non-participating payment location and paid with that barcode, and that establishment took their payment. Franco worked with that entity and got it corrected, and without the customer losing service. So we worked them through that. So we want to help these customers. We don't want to hurt them. So we'll benefit from that, having 4,000 people come through the door who don't need to come to us only during business and suffer the stress of having to get to this government office, if you will, to pay their bill. They can go to these other locations and pay their bill and actually save a penny. But
change is just so difficult for
it is.
so many. But those little touches, though, guys, thank you very much, because that's what makes us your hometown electric utility. That customer service that the other people, who those other people are, they can't match that.
What other people?
And there are no other people.
I
Honestly, I was gonna make a joke. I was gonna say, Franco, make sure you download this video, this segment right here, okay, and have it ready. Raise negotiation time, okay.
Yeah.
have it ready to go. You're doing a wonderful job, Franco. You're doing a wonderful job.
Ed's throwing spitballs. Ed's blowing spitballs at you.
No.
You got it on tape.
Commissioner Robinson.
And to that point, the increase in service to our customers has quadrupled service from our Franco and his team that has been creditable beyond. The information center has experienced, the frustration of customers and how Franco and the service department has dealt with them. They need kudos because of the increase in their workload.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. You mind if we take a quick break, or
Well,
We can
We're almost
we'll just finish this
Oh, I
slide,
thought you
and
were
then we'll
finished,
come
sorry.
back and talk, and we can take a break and come back and talk
Okay.
about the website.
that sounds great.
So the purpose of this slide was just to give you an update on where we are with net metering and bringing all of the customers on board to the new system. So we have 107 customers that are connected to the system and up and running. Of those 107, 63 have provided some of the materials necessary in the interconnection package. Now, we had set a December 31 deadline to be complete. These 63 are largely complete. These are, I would call, kind of, generally speaking, minor administrative, dotting I's and crossing T's. They've been working in good faith to get these things done, and there's no significant issue. I'm sorry, 63 are complete. Thank you, Joel. See what happens when I take off my reading glasses. 63 are complete. Not yet complete are 21. So the 21 are the ones that are working in good faith to be complete. 63 are completely done. We have 23 that have not acknowledged at all the request. Radio silence, in spite of registered letters, in some cases in-person visits, multiple phone calls, emails, and corresponding to all of the address they have. So we have 23 where we hear nothing. And then we have 14 new applications that are currently in the permitting process right now. Now we have seen at least one in the permitting process, and there may be more, where, for example, the installer is seeking approval for a project that exceeds the caps by more than just a rounding error. So those, of course, they're non-conforming, and we can't deal with them. So generally speaking, the customers are availing themselves. They're coming in. The team does meet with them and facilitates the process. If it's a matter of us getting drawings that we already have, we're not going to hold them against them. We're just pulling drawings from places. Not all of the customers need help. We'll make whatever copies they need. They sit down with us in person, and we walk them right through it. And it's easy. Once they actually come in, it's the 23 that we haven't heard from at all.
Right.
That we'll have to decide.
City Manager, did you want to wrap things up? I bet Vice Mayor would like to ask a question first.
Go ahead and ask the question. I just want to wrap up.
I just wanted to ask, out of the 23 non-responses, are they commercial? Are they residential? A combination of? I understand that our largest customer is one of the non-responsive.
Yeah, it's a combination, and yes, the largest customer is one of those.
And what would be the next step?
Well, according to the current rules, they're not in the program. So
And they'll see that in their bills in the February bill, or
in the
are they already seeing it?
in the February cycle? No, not because the current bills that they have are actually for energy delivered through December, mostly through a lot of the December billing cycle. So we'll allow some overlap in the January because the bills don't cut off exactly December 31, but the February cycle of bills, which would include the January consumption, according to the rules that we have to work with, they're not in the program.
They're not in the program, so therefore they will not see that savings. or that
Correct.
Payback.
Correct.
Because traditionally in the code department, when we have issues and we've sent and special magistrate and everything, when we send them to foreclosure, it tends to make them step up and come to the table. So maybe, that's the next step. We'll see in February when people are actually not, seeing the returns or.
Right. Fortunately, it's only 23 out of the 107, but 20.
Good numbers.
It's
But
it's amazing to me, and at least one of those, I know Joel has been in their lobby talking to their manager multiple times. They've gotten the correspondence, and
Tell us a little bit about the correspondence. So do we visit them? Do we send certified mail? What are the?
Let me ask Joel to join us.
So come on down.
Introduce yourself.
An encore performance here.
Short time.
Good evening, everyone. Joel Rutsky, Lake Worth Electric Utility Revenue Protection Manager. So basically what we've done is every one of the customers in the program, we sent them certified mail. So we, the ones that responded to us, no issues. There were ones obviously that they weren't home. We all hate this, right? You get that little postcard in the mailbox and you say, I don't want to go stand in line at the post office. So a lot of them just never went and picked up the package. They probably thought it was from the IRS. So those people, we followed up with a regular mail delivery, so we knew that it was delivered to the house. And then we got some more in. And the majority of these ones that, out of those 23, we sent emails if we have their email on file. The one that you asked about, our largest solar customer, we have made numerous attempts. We have gone in there twice. We've sent them certified mail to their establishment, as well as certified mail to their billing address, their corporate headquarters. We've sent them regular mail to their their service address and to their billing address and corporate headquarters. I have gone in personally and spoken to the manager twice, left him my card twice. He told me he had forwarded it to his regional manager. We have not heard anything out of them yet. So.
But we've gone above and beyond.
We have gone above and beyond. We have not told anybody, we've not just sent a post-it on their front door and all of a sudden we're saying, but they've gotten certified letters, regular letters, emails, correspondence, and
They know the consequences.
they do. And I mean, even there was one person that I was on the phone with the other day. Won't mention any names, but I mean, it was an attorney. It was actually an attorney, no offense, that lives in town and has their lawyer's office in town. Okay. And when we had him on the phone, I mean, I do it with Steve, our new revenue protection manager, right? And he actually says, "Oh yeah, you know what? I remember getting that last summer, but I really didn't do anything about it." So I think once they, like you said, once they hear the consequences or they see the consequences where they see they're not getting those credits on their bills anymore, that's when we're going to be like, "Oh, what's happening here?" And we'll tell them, "You never responded to us. You didn't send us any of this documentation back. Just get it to us and you're back on, I guess then it picks up from there. I guess the big question is going to be, right, based on the program said that if you did not respond, you're no longer in the program. So now the big question will probably be, let's say you're not in the program anymore, all right? And now all of a sudden you want to get back in it. Do we hold them to the new standards and tell them that your system now is too large? That's going to be the big question.
Madam Mayor, actually how the rules were written, they are no longer grandfathered in, so they would have to reapply into the program, and all the new rules would apply to them.
So then that would probably be the case for these 23 people, 23 customers.
That's correct.
And would there be any retroactive? So what if they opt back into the program and they do
Well, here's February.
qualify?
You got to remember, we're in February, all right? We're still actively reaching out to these people. We're not just washing our hands of it. We're still actively reaching out. So let's say if you happen to be, we'll use College Park as an example. They're at the end of the cycle, the billing cycle. They might not get their meter read until, let's say February 20th. Chances are, if they get their paperwork in before the meter gets read, chances are they probably won't even notice that they weren't in the program. Yeah.
So we've gone above and beyond.
We have.
Commissioner Harden?
Yeah, just if someone were to fight us on this, what approach would they take? And I'm wondering, and you don't have to address this only, but I'm wondering if someone would try to stretch, for example, Bert Harris to address this particular, because they had an investment-backed expectation, when they installed their solar panels, yada yada yada. I'm just wondering, if someone isn't responding because they say, if they're going to try to call our bluff and try to take us to court, what would they try to argue?
I couldn't speculate exactly what they try to argue. Now, Bert Harris is typically tied to your property rights, and I don't believe that the solar perm affords them a property right. Plus, under the statute, they have to have an interconnection agreement with the city.
Right.
And that's part of this package that's not being provided to the city. So under the statute, we could argue you don't have an interconnection agreement, therefore you can't be part of the program by statute. So it's kind of a hard argument to make. I'm sure someone probably more creative than me will come up with an argument, but at this point, I don't know how to get past the
So they have a
statutory
leg to
hurdle.
stand on.
Correct.
They'll wage.
Right.
They'll
Well, I
wage.
guess the other argument would be, I guess, to what Vice Mayor Amoroso brought up about the foreclosures from code. So do you get to a point where you say, if you're not going to do the interconnection agreement, do we make sure that, then you legally cannot be attached to our grid, so now we're going to shut your power down. Now you have no power. It doesn't
What
get
would
that
be the
far.
next step?
Right, exactly. So that's just food for thought.
You stir in the pot before you left.
No, I'm done.
Thank you, Joel. I just wanted to, I think Ed's through with this portion, compliment Ed on his tremendous leadership in the time he's been here, and given the time that y'all have dealt with electric utility and lived in the city. It's quite a stark difference from what we used to deal with. It really occupied a tremendous amount of bandwidth for this body and the administration, and sucked a lot of air out of the room when the electric utility had issues that we grapple with. What we're seeing now under Ed's leadership and his capable team, his assistant directors, I see Brian's here, Jason Bailey, Walt, Joel, and our new revenue protection manager, Stephen. And well, I also want to mention Clyde, who's been crunching numbers like crazy to generate quantifiable, objective data that's showing you the direction and the improvements in operations, tough negotiations with our power contracts, constantly looking at the numbers and doing an incredible job. And this is an amazing team, and Franco, customer service, goes without saying with all the compliments tonight. We're not done. We need to keep the foot on the gas pedal All this could be for naught if we don't continue to refurbish the transmission and distribution system and pursue the SHRIP program and the tie line. So while they're doing all this good work on the day-to-day operations and making things better for the owners, they're looking to the future, and we're going to be making significant investments into this utility to carry it for the next 50 years. It's citizen-owned electric utility. The profits for this go to put things into parks. It pays for police services. It does a lot of good in a city that needs revenues. And we're competitive in the marketplace. We're going in above and beyond to be a progressive energy leader when you talk about our carbon footprint and where we're going there. We got some great things. And of course, I'll tag on the ocean current energy. We're reaching way out there. So to see this utility go from a liability and something that people kicked to understanding it has asset, it's a value that has, it's an asset that has tremendous value, to now making it a brand that people will be talking about. Let's bring our business or lives there because we get what they're trying to do. It fits this city so well, but it requires constant work and great management. And I'm very proud of this team. I can't say enough about the work they do. So I just wanted to close with that. Thank you, guys. You're doing a great job.
In 2
Well,
years.
And I would say too, that raising the level of professionalism we have in the organization, it really gives our team individually a chance to shine. Because I get more proud of y'all every single year, but it's as we've raised the bar, everybody stands out now. You know what I mean, for the professionals that they are at every level, and I'm just really proud of your whole team. I really am.
Well, thank you. We're willing. I know you wanted to take a break. Then the next portion is to talk more about our new website.
Yep.
So
We'll just take a quick break.
It's up.
Thank you. I know.
Madam Mayor, it's 8:04.
Let's reconvene.
Okay, thank you. We'll pick up on probably the most exciting part of the evening. So, as you know, yeah, the city has revamped its web presence, and at the same time, we've created a more prominent web presence for the electric utility. So the city's website, a great website, and I'm not here to roll out the city's website. They've done a great job of doing that. Keith and Lauren have done and Ben have done a great job at that. But we've now added a utility page that goes beyond just allowing customers to perform transactions, which is to pay or to report an outage, but for us to be able to send them information and provide them a lot more about our vision, our message, where we're going. So to that end, we retained Michael Taylor, who is to my right. His firm is Simple Mind, and out of Atlanta. And Michael has worked with the Florida Municipal Power Agency for many, many years in helping them create their annual report, and has spent a lot of time in non-utility businesses, helping them communicate better with their customers and stakeholders. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael, who will talk to you about what we've tried to do, and then between Michael and Franco, they'll walk you through the website, which is now live, and you'll get to see it. I'm also going to point out that citizen-owned energy is now a domain of ours. We are citizen-owned energy. So if you can go to this through the website, but you can go to citizenownenergy.com and you'll be on Lake Worth Beach Electric Utility website. So Michael's going to walk you through that.
Great. I need to talk into this one. So yeah, there was a lot of threads of conversation tonight where there's a need to translate it, right? And there are blocking and tackling items where people need to be educated, people need to have context, people need to understand things. We call them blocking and tackling. And by the way, I sort of see this as a program and a system more than a website. It's just the reflection of a strategy to translate them and educate people in the ways that help us do the things we're all talking about doing here. For example, payments. You know, if you're removing the ability to pay by cash, the truth is, in context, you're actually providing more locations and convenience for those who still want to pay with cash to do so, right? It's always a tool, right? Communication is at the center of people, and so we conceived it as a tool. And so there's longer burn things like the strategy to position Lake Worth Beach as a active and innovative city when it comes to sustainability. Ocean current technology is very exciting. The partnership with the city is very exciting. These things are not going to be intuitively known by anyone unless you do a great job pulling it together in a channel where people can get to it, and it's intriguing and put together as a, you'll see that it's put together as an editorial product. And if you want to go ahead and just click into it.
Biggie. So by the way, this will be available. You can link to it
Hey,
right
sure.
on the city's website. Actually, Franco, maybe that'd be helpful just to show you, you're at the city's website, how you can actually get there directly. So you can click on the logo for the utility.
Yep.
And get to the same place.
You need to talk into the mic, because I won't be able to hear when I give a minute.
So you can get there by linking off the city's website or dropping down on the utilities tab and getting there as well. So there's a number of ways right off the city website, which you'll get over to this new landing page for citizenownenergy.com. Yep, there you go.
You know, it's funny, I was sitting there, and when I present, I never sit. And I was like, this is really awkward.
I could tell.
In the fetal position. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to do my
But you still need to talk
Done it,
into
Mike.
the mic.
Okay,
Yeah.
right here. So when you look at it, it's done like an editorial product. So, and the reason for that is there's two reasons. One is a functional reason, is we really want to build a lot of rich material so that not only do you see something in the right away that's timely and intriguing, but that it's also a reservoir that people can come back to, because we want to populate things there that are good reference materials, that build traffic, that build a wider audience. For example, if you have a great sustainability message, You have wonderful, innovative things going on. These are things that other municipals, a wider community would be interested in. It's a great promotional channel for people who are looking to locate here, or there's a residence or business. So let's just go up here and let's go to the top and we'll just look at the way it's constructed. So at the top, we're going to have roughly a monthly feature that talks about something that's important for people to understand, but also that it's something people want to read. And so we put a little more attention into the feature for two reasons. And how does it become a feature? One, it's something very important that requires some context to explain. And two, there's something really interesting about reading it. Like, I didn't know iguanas shut down electricity for the city. I mean, probably most people don't know that. It's actually quite interesting. So why am I looking at an iguana and you're talking about reliability? Well, because it's pretty funny and it's true. So we talked about wildlife and the effect of wildlife on reliability. And what is that? What are we really trying to do? Really trying to talk about all the great things you're doing to improve reliability, right? Exactly. So we could, there's two ways to communicate, right? You could put it on a spreadsheet and show a list and nobody's going to pay attention, even to the people who wrote the list. Or you can say, you know, this is really funny, iguanas and squirrels. And we have a team of people who are sitting around actually thinking about building and acquiring innovative poles that make it hard for iguanas to shut down a city, you know, things like that. So that's the feature. And if you go back to the home page, you scroll down. So it's a hierarchy, right? There's things we want to communicate. Is it something, a blocking and tackling thing, or is it more strategic? In this case, the solar news. So you have two other features, and these kind of cycle down over time, right? So as the iguana feature will sort of cycle down and off, down to more news and be archived and so on. So we've got two major solar events at the top. If you scroll down, we talked a lot about electric vehicles. We talked a lot about electrification and the potential positive impact it can have on the utility. So building the case for adopting cars is a great thing for a utility to do. This is a great position for us to take, is to say, we know electricity and we know the case for driving an electric car, which is fantastic, actually. We're going to put a calculator in there. I think we already have one. If most people knew that they could eliminate a good chunk of their car payment in gas savings, I think they would think a lot differently about driving an electric car. So things like that. So we're going to not just put information out there, but actually think mindfully about the information. What do we want people to know and understand or do? And then put things that are very useful and meaningful to them there. So there's an internal, what do we want, but also make it so that it's very helpful and useful for people who come. So it's not just a thing that we do and nobody visits or benefits from. Payment locations, what to do after a storm. You know, there's a lot of confusion about that. And when you don't communicate, you have perception by default, which is usually not great, right? People are cynical if you don't fill in the blanks. And to the right here, you see stats. If you don't put data and factual information out there of what you're actually doing, they're not going to know. And people have the perception by default, which tends to be negative. So, you know, I haven't talked a lot about the website. I've talked a lot about what's behind it. And that's kind of how the content's going to be conceived, is to talk about the priorities, all these priorities that we're talking about here, and say what needs to be translated. Now, this is a website, but it also can, it's not just this thing you have to go to. We can do email campaigns. If this is a great feature and we think a very specific group of people need to see it, we can send it to them, right? Email, we can track it. There's a lot of great things you can do to it, so.
Now, have we retained, I'm sorry, may I? Is it,
You,
I don't want to interrupt
absolutely.
you. Have we retained your services to do ongoing marketing endeavors and creative endeavors?
Yes, we have.
Okay, so will you be responsible for, like, when you talk about, like, do we do a monthly e-newsletter? You know,
Yes.
do we do, or a weekly, did you know?
Yep.
What about search engine optimization or marketing, like Google? Because I know Google's changed a lot of the ways in which they rise information to the top, where
Yes,
you
they
have to
have.
use the content on your site and then also
Right.
feed the content into Google. Now they're not doing so much with keywords anymore. They're doing more with content is king. So it's great that you're doing this on a regular basis now. But will you be doing? Does the city have a budget of any kind to do some of that so that
We
our
are doing
good
that.
stories are?
Yes, yes, and I'm glad you asked that because that's what you don't see here. That's apparent. So
It's good
the
stuff.
good thing about Google is if you write good things,
Right.
and people like to read them, you're rewarded for that.
Exactly.
It used to be you knew the right tricks and you hired somebody that did it. Those people are shut out of the business. Now you actually have to do things that people really love and go, man, check out this car calculator, whatever it is.
Yep.
And if you start archiving things, for example, I would like to get in touch with the American Power, Municipal Power, was it EPA?
American Public Power Association.
Association. They produce a lot of great content. They're very smart about it. If they see what we're doing and we can curate some of their stuff, we can create a wider audience. We can build it's really great when you start to have a bigger audience. Another thing with Google and the later revisions of it are, I hate to say this, but the rich get richer. If you start having traffic, it starts rising to the top, which in turn builds more traffic because Google says that's relevant. When people come and read it and start linking, and there starts to be all these connections, they're like, this is more relevant, rank it to the top. So
Well, I think the reason I asked that is because, like, when we did our solar farm event, the first our one right here on site, the news media didn't pick up or follow or really give us anything for it. The fact that we are the only municipally owned with our own solar plant producing power to generate to our grid is there anybody else in Palm Beach County?
No.
Is there anyone else in South Florida?
Municipal, no.
Municipal. Okay. So that's a big deal. And no, we never picked up any traction on that. Those stories, even back to our own solar farm, not just our purchase power agreements, those types of things really need to be
On there now. too.
on there now too.
and you know
and
what?
Pushed
It's
out.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It happens to be something people are really interested
It was an old cap landfill.
Yeah, we built
Solar
on our
gets a
dump.
lot of attention.
I'm saying an old cap landfill. I mean, to talk about what a city's doing with the lands that they do have and how they do them or whatever. But those types of things, we haven't done a superb. We weren't given a chance to do a superb job, or we didn't get the local media involved as it should be. I just want to make sure that all of those really good stories, old and current and futuristic, are all put on there for archives, so that people can
Yes.
finally see them and how incredible they are.
So we're now on that path. This is the marketing department that, we didn't have internally. We now have Michael
Yay.
under
Sorry, I
contract.
do this for a living on my other job, so that's why I'm
So-
excited.
The other good thing that's happened is we've greatly strengthened the tie to FMPA. And why do I bring that? Because on February 12th, FMPA is coming here to do a shoot here of our field with our solar vehicle, our electric powered vehicles, which if you think about it, are probably being powered by the solar field. And that's going to be part of a social media campaign that FMPA is launching. It's called What's Behind the Switch.
Love it.
They're coming here on the 12th. So we're ramping everything up. So we're putting these things out, and we're going to keep hitting on the message that we're going to be greater than 50% carbon free by 2024 on this path that we're on. So that's a big part of our brand going forward. And it can't be just something that we say to each other. We're telling the world, but more we're telling our owners, right? The people who own this thing and invest in it because they live here, pay taxes here, and they're customers of ours.
And-
This is
and are
their
we
product. This is who they are too.
Are we creating a database for capturing all the people to log in to get the e-newsletters and all that kind of stuff?
Now, I understand we have one, and I think we should add to it,
Add.
and of course share.
Yeah.
Right. So show if we're building a good database. If we want to build some influence or just make something very clear, we need to intentionally have an effort to gather those addresses. Right.
Yep.
Some of it's opt-in, different ways of doing it, but I think that's very important because that is a huge thing. Is building traffic by having a reservoir that people go to. Also, when they come and they see lots of other things that they want to engage in. So, and on the social media side, this is really built for that, so that you not only have an archive, but that archive is very clearly referenceable by people coming in. I see ocean current technology, and what we want to see in a couple of years is we have 20 articles, we have 3 infographics, we have a video we did that called an explainer that went viral. You know, that kind of thing helps a lot too.
Well, normally I like the social media feeds on a web page too, but not necessarily within government. It's not always helpful because you've got the things that get posted on that. I normally wouldn't.
You'll notice this isn't real interactive,
Yeah.
and we were thinking that. Of course, you want that, right?
But
You have that, right?
Yeah.
You have that. You have Facebook, and you have
right.
There needs to be a little more balance, right? So instead of making it a forum that becomes a little bit reactive on that,
Right.
we wanted to actually go ahead and just put some balance in terms of
I love it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vice Mayor?
And along those lines, so are we working with Lauren and her team with Facebook to push some of this out? Because, you know, this is fabulous, and if you take it and you push it out through our Facebook, you know,
Yes.
she'll monitor the responses and things. You know, you don't
Yes.
necessarily have to set up another platform
Exactly.
for people that don't live here anymore to attack the old utility. But we should be pushing it out with her on her Facebook that represents
right.
the city of Lake Worth Beach.
We have to do that. I mean, this is really not the whole idea behind it. You know this if you're in this world. The whole idea behind these communication channels is they totally don't work in a vacuum. You know, it's like, oh, come to this great thing. It's not a thing. It should be connected. And so when there's relevant materials to share, we want to do as much as possible. And we just had a meeting with those guys, right? They were all in our meeting. So when we come up with this editorial, I kind of see it as an editorial product a little bit. We come up with it, they're involved. We're all coming up with those ideas. And so when we're producing things, we'll produce things, they produce things, we talk about them and share them. And so, yeah, that's it.
And by you putting it on there, then all of a sudden she's sharing it on
Yes.
the regular.
Right.
Yeah,
And I think we should almost get to the point where some of this is automated.
Yeah.
And you'll notice when you go to the utility, to the city site, that they went ahead and put our feed on there, right? So when we update, that starts feeding in. That is.
Yeah, it should be on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And, you know, for instance, when she puts something on our city Facebook, I share it on both my pages. Now I have over 5,000 people on each of my pages.
Right.
So, you know, I automatically, as soon as it comes across, I share it. And then, you know, you get more shares and you get more, you know, it's just continuously
That's
keeps
right.
that moving.
So what we've talked about, we met with them. We've met with them a number of times, but most recently today we met for 2 hours this afternoon before we came over here. The first hour was just going through the detail of this page. The second hour was focused more on I would call the drumbeat or the cadence of communications. What are we planning for February? What are we planning for March? What are the pieces? And what else is happening in the city that we want to be able to link up with, so that we're coincidental.
But remember, like
So
the
we're
mayor
not
said, what has
accidental.
happened too that we may have forgotten or we weren't able to market properly.
We spent some time today on what the annual report will be, because we will be producing a 2019 annual report that will follow the format of the strategic plan and the visions, right? The documents I ran into your office to get today while you were meeting. So we're going to build on that format for a annual report that is not going to look like pages and pages of balance sheets, income statements, and the auditor's statement and all of that. It's going to be more about what we've accomplished in 19, what the vision is for 20, where we're headed down the road, and how we support the different pieces of what the city's trying to achieve. Because we're integral. We're not a separate entity, right? We're part of the city. We're a part of this.
Yeah, there
this
needs
thing.
to be clarity.
Mr. Hardy?
Sorry. First off, the website looks great, and it looks great on mobile too. I was not idly looking at my phone. I love everything about it. Colors, all of it, the way it's laid out, it's fantastic. The only thing I'll have to say is on that last part about the annual report, there are some folks out there who want all that information, maybe, and I don't know if this is possible, but maybe we should have like a summary that's, yeah, I don't want to say propaganda, but that is our message, and have another document that's for the wonky people who want to get deep into the weeds, that's available, but less.
Yeah.
I was thinking we're going to produce it like the one you said.
Yeah.
Like a one sheet.
It's not going to be a
To learn
formal,
more.
although
For the layperson.
it's not going to be a formal annual report with the numbers and the tables. It's really going to be a communication piece with some structure as an annual report, like a letter from management directors we talked about. Maybe it's a letter with a combination of some of you folks writing a letter together, that kind of thing. And
Or a short piece of
some
paper.
graphical, some data,
Mhm.
but the data is presented visually and it's fast read and it's really just supporting the topics. It's not that, to your point, you're right, annual reports are
Yeah.
not like that.
And the only thing I would say, I would advise you, knowing how this is a content-driven webpage, and you're only as good as the person you put in charge of communicating the messages to him and his staff. Meaning, if you're not planning ahead and you're not articulating and you don't have somebody that's a point person for him to do his job, then it's not going to be a stellar project. So don't err on the side of not thinking it's important to have someone that can communicate regularly with you and your staff.
I would say that's the part that works quite well because there's something I think is very important in the communication, and that's talking about the actual strategy of
Right.
not communication. What are you trying to do? When is the ask?
Mhm.
Is there a grant that you're going to go for in 6 months? When do you start communicating that? Not before the date. Now,
Right.
And so we talk a lot about, probably 2/3 of our conversation are just about what's going on.
Mhm.
And then the conversation comes in about, there are some points in there that communication can have some influence. And to me, that's where it becomes a real tool when you're not just, and I know what you're saying and I know why you said it, because the vast majority of the social media are people just
They're
turning stuff out. And
it's reactive
who
and,
cares,
it's reactive and it's not proactive.
Yeah, everybody has too much information. So we're not trying to create information. But
Well, anybody can do social media, but
That's
to
right.
actually plan a strategy for it and to
Yes.
plan it out and to do it and to create the stories
Yeah.
ahead of time to know where you're going and where you want to be down the road requires a planning stage. So I just want to,
yeah,
and
I
I'm
totally
glad that
agree.
you hired a professional company to do it because that's very important.
And the way it is executed. For example, we talked about today. You can't. There's some things that people need to understand. That if you wrote an article, the people that need it will not receive it.
Mhm.
So you put it together in a way. For example, really great infographic that just puts it all in context immediately. If it's like. So we talked a bit about how should we craft the information so that it does the real thing in the real world you're trying to do, rather
Well,
than
it used-
posting something.
But cities notoriously, though, like to give you old days kind of, due to the fact that we reduced the kilowatt hours of the so and so and the so and so, and by the time you got to it 3 paragraphs later, there will be a reduction of 1.2s. If you're not starting with, it's going to cost you $5 less on your electric bill this month because of X, Y, and Z. But you know what I mean. But they'll sit. I call it the AM radio, FM radio version.
Right.
The long story with the sound bites, and then the the FM version, which is why does it matter to me?
That's right.
And that's the
Yeah. If you don't know the audience and
Mhm.
what you want to leave behind, then that's why I like to think of it as an editorial product, because most of the choice as to whether I'm going to read it or not, good or bad, no judgment, is going to be determined in the first half second.
exactly.
Right. You got to think of that stuff,
So what we want to do is transition from, and this is what we've done over the past 2 years, from an environment where we communicate little or nothing. What was communicated to a very small group, either in this room or that room. What actually got to the public was the perception that they got from somebody who reported second, third, or fourth hand of what actually happened in this room or that room, to a website that provided static information. We're required to tell you this. This happened, or this is on the schedule. To now saying, we're going to use this to build our brand. This is being used to have our outbound messages about our successes and what we're trying to be and what the vision is and what we're doing along the way to get there. So it's the good news stuff. Commissioner Robinson talks about when I'm going to talk about the good news. Here we are, we're talking about the good things. These are the things that we're accomplishing. This is where we're going. This is our outbound messaging. And we're trying to control the message as best we can by getting our information out there about what we believe customers really care about. Reliability, sustainability, environmental, carbon reduction, things like that.
Commissioner Robinson?
Two things. Do you address residential solar power? I know that it's contradictory sort of, but in terms of our city being progressive,
It's not. It will be addressed because it's a part of the family. It's here, right?
yes.
But what's on there right now is what the city has done in terms of FMPA Solar 1 and Solar 2. And this is a living document. So this will continue to be up. Yeah.
In terms of promoting residential solar power,
Yes.
that's a promise.
And also over
2 months.
things
Well-
that are actually.
Yeah. Let me. When you say by promoting, we're not in the business of trying to encourage people to buy less of what it is that we sell. So,
that's
however,
why,
we're not going to hide the fact that it's here, and it's a part of our power supply. So,
but you're part of the big picture of
yeah,
our city
it's
as and I understand
Right.
it's sort of contradictory, but it's still the picture of Lake Worth
it
Beach being
it's a part of the energy mix in our city. How much of the solar has come from the customers who installed solar. So, but we believe that the bigger picture is that you'll be more than 50% carbon free, even without buying a solar system to put on your roof.
that's great. The other question is, how many other cities do you promote, and have they gotten any money from Volkswagen's penalty grants or fines? The fine to Volkswagen, can we get some of that?
The what?
I think that's a legal question.
Yeah,
Well, or are we
I think-
applying for
yeah,
a
let me-
grant from the?
let me-
How do you go about getting some of that billions in their
Right.
fine?
So
Oh, I see.
let me try.
Yeah.
First of all, Michael's not involved in
He's
that.
not
I think
involved.
if I understand.
And he
correctly-
doesn't speak Hermanese, so
Right.
I want some of that.
So what you're referring to is the Volkswagen settlement
yes.
related to the scandal with the emissions testing on the diesels. Those settlement dollars, I believe, are controlled by the state, and the state will then control how they're doled out to the various utilities or municipalities or entities within the state. We've had so much on our plate, we haven't gone after that. There's only so much we can do at any one time. So it's out there. The odds of some of that we'd love to have that. The latest I heard is that they're talking about putting vehicle charging stations along major routes of egress in the event of a storm. That would be 95 and the Turnpike. Well, we'd love to have some of that. We could put some charging stations somewhere off of 6th Avenue or by the train station on Dixie Highway. Certainly, we could do that. But we just haven't gotten to the point where we've had the resources to actually go after that right now.
And it's not worth contracting somebody on a percentage of return
Well,
to
I
them.
think the best way to do that would be to perhaps go through Richard Pinsky's firm and do some lobbying that way to try to secure those grants and actually get a grant writer on it. But that's
We've had those conversations, but that's not relevant to the website. That's something totally not relevant
Okay,
to the website.
finish, done.
Now, I have just one question for you in regards to the retainer of the firm. One of the things that we've asked for in communicating, which all this information is now going to be included in the site, is a piece for realtors. And I've been asking for this for 8 years from under previous people in possession. This story is still not being told. They don't, especially realtors from outside this area, still don't know who we are, who we've become, and whatever. I think that there really needs to be a serious one sheet, two-sided sheet or whatever that they can hand out to future homeowners or business owners in our community to know what they can expect and not fall back on a reputation from 15 years ago or whatever it may be in a story that's been told over and over again. Some of them still telling those same stories today, and it's something some baggage we just can't get rid of. But they're we all know the importance of realtors as we grow our communities, and I think them having something accessible that they can give out, I've been saying for 8 years now, really is important. And it could be the same information or with some statistics or average homeowner's bill, commercial bill based on an X square foot, the rate parity, the solar influence, those types of things.
I can tell you who it's almost as important to as the realtors, and that's the bartenders.
Yeah.
Because you'd be surprised at how many, and this may happen to you too. I mean,
Yeah,
invariably
everywhere.
sitting at a bar or restaurant, you strike up a conversation with a bartender or a person next to you and said, "Oh, what do you do?" And it goes on, "Oh, you work for Lake, well, I hear that. Whoa."
In the barbershop.
And in the barbershop.
Nobody can afford it.
Their stories and the things that they have are no longer true. They're not relevant. They've been out of date for many, many years, but they still have that, right? So it's the realtors, it's the bartenders, it's the barber, or the hairdresser.
You need something
And,
physical
you know,
to hand
because
them.
people chat
and
about
then with the website on it, then they'll go there, find out more, and get into it. But
Yes, and we talked actually a lot about that. If you remember in our early meetings, it's like who are we talking to, right? And what can we do in concert with the city to have a coherent message? That's another thing. If you can have great slivers of messages, it just won't hold together. I mean, you have short attention span theater out there. So there's something about a coherent message, unified message that you see many times in different ways, right?
well, what was the Win Dixie? Getting better all the time.
Yes.
Well, we always laughed about it because it was like, we don't stink anymore. You know what I mean? We're, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We suck less.
We suck less.
Anybody from Cleveland?
No.
We're
Don't ever say the river burns. I'm so sick of that. Yeah, the river caught on fire, but it was 30 years ago. But they hear about it every time.
Oh my
Still,
God.
still talking about it.
Part of what we want to do too is, we know that we have a lot more work to do on improving reliability. We have a lot of work ahead of us to really get reliability to where it needs to be. What we want to do is build a sense of ownership. The people who live in this town and pay the bills or are part of this community, those of us, people that work here, live here, are here as shop owners. This is ours. It may not be perfect, but it's ours and it's getting better every day. So there's a sense of pride and ownership, and that's part of what we want to do here is to showcase these are the great things we're doing. We're not just about reliability. It needs to be improved. There's a lot of really cool things happening here. Find another place in the state of Florida that's going to have our low carbon footprint. Find another place that's going to be as progressive, that's doing these types of things, that is also fun to be. So there's some cool stuff, and that's what we want to do here is to build that brand image and build a positive image. It doesn't mean that we don't care about reliability anymore. We're working hard on that, but give us a little latitude while we do all these other great things too, and we're going to catch up.
And just real quick on the mayor had mentioned it a little bit, but for the consultant, the mayor and I have done it a couple of times. We did kind of did you know, and then we've done it through the CRA. The mayor went and met with the board of realtors, and we've had great turnout. And the realtors and the community leaders have walked away and said, "I didn't know. Can you do more of this?" And I think that's where she was trying to go with a piece that could speak when we're not having a speaking engagement or meetings about did you know. Because there's so much, I don't respond on social media where the city's involved, but I look quite often and watch the threads, and 90% of the people responding don't live in Lake Worth, or they used to live in Lake Worth Beach and they don't anymore, but they're still living in the past. So we need to get past that by sending out the right information. And I think this is a great start, and I agree with you, Ed, the who, what, where, especially with the solar. We're not in the business of selling solar on or for anyone else, and again, we create utility, electric, and that's what we should be marketing in the who, what, where.
And also the baggage of old appliances.
Yeah.
With some of the old stock or some of the more, financially challenged neighborhoods in our community, you see they're paying these exorbitant electric bills and things like that because of old
inventory.
So, my first instinct when I hear you is that there's something really important but quite interesting about not knowing that you're using an appliance that is bleeding your
Completely.
minimal income, right?
Mhm.
That's a blocking and tackling. What we call blocking. This is just things people need to know, but they need to be put in a way that people want to actually go, oh wow,
And
did you know?
Refrigerators,
great.
window shakers.
Well, we
Yeah.
have a large amount of rentals.
Yeah.
And
that's
we
what
have
it
a
is.
lot, we have great rental properties and great investors, but we also have a large amount of people slap a coat of paint on it and get as much money as we can. And they're not bringing up the property. So people are coming in and renting, and they love living in Lake Worth Beach, but they still think they're paying a lot of high utility bills because they have old infrastructure, window shakers, no installation. So the property owners are not investing, but we need to get the message out that it's not us, it's old inventory.
But it sticks on you, right?
Correct.
The default
Absolutely.
thing. In the vacuum of information or just understanding becomes all this strange, bizarre, or just wrong
Yeah.
ideas.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
And then also just showing enough data and factual information so that you're not just sort of putting things out there, right? Like you really want to anchor things with data points, right? Comparisons. Like, okay, I have a product that's bleeding. Well, give me something interesting and compare it to another product that doesn't do that.
Well, like
for
you
example.
did with the iguanas and the lizard, and you know, I see the same thing with a house and a window shaker, and you
Yeah.
know, air going out of the roof because there's no installation, and door jams that don't match, and it's just pumping
Visually,
out.
right.
Visually.
Yeah.
Oh, and they can look and say,
this.
"I live
three
in that
times.
house."
You do a
No
visual,
wonder I'm
three
paying
times. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Like,
So-
like people will be like,
It's huge. People totally react to visuals by a factor of 3 to 5. I mean, it's a lot.
I was able to, with the help of staff in my old house, bring down the costs in my house of my complete utility bill simply by making some minor adjustments to certain things, and adding coating on my roof and putting in, insulation in the attic and things, because I had a 1920s house, whatever. We're talking a couple $100 a month that it changed things in it. If you see, and here.
And did you know that we offer that service?
Right, you did, and half the time, which was interesting, people come up to me that have a house, a smaller square footage, that are paying twice what I was paying in my house to be in a 1,000 square foot unit. Simply because you had a picture of that clunker AC unit and whatever, and the door jams and the lack of insulation and whatever. I mean, it could save people thousands and thousands of dollars every year.
Yeah, and if you say, I want to tap into that curiosity. We like to learn stuff. I mean, we're just like, put it in a way that's like, yeah, did you know?
Right.
That inquisitive kind of mind, just tap into it and then show it to them in a way that's like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Commissioner Hardy?
My brother needs to know this, or
Yeah.
For the record, what's the name of your firm?
That's Simple Mind.
Simple Mind.
Yeah.
Atlanta.
Atlanta.
That's it.
Oh. I'm thinking of the song by the group Simple Minds.
Simple
I mean, he
Minds.
gets that all the time. Breakfast Club,
Mine.
Simple
Yeah.
Minds, Breakfast Club. The key thing that he's been able to help bring to this, and with the leadership team we've got, is that content. We've had a hard time, and governments don't do content well, Mayor, you said that. So with what's happening on this side, as well as on the rest of the city government, that you're going to be seeing some improvements. Selling the city for people to come here and invest and bring their lives, can happen on both sides of the equation. Because customer base is what we have to have. We have to grow our customer base, or his business is not going to be, you guys, I appreciate the comments on getting everybody to be more efficient, but that's actually going to make it more difficult. But it's the right thing to do. But we've got to get customers. And conversely, on the other side, we need to see people building new units in this city to offer a product, because open the doors and say, this is a great place to come and live, but you haven't got a product for them to buy. So connect the dots in this position of leadership, all the way from making a sales pitch, but don't be a liar on the back end by not being able to deliver on what you truly want them to do. And that's a connection that's very comprehensive. We haven't had that capability for many years. It's now coming together, and now we have a compelling story with track record and good news to tell that's solid. It's not a whitewash. This is genuine good stuff.
long have you been doing it for FMPM?
About 18 years of everything
Okay.
communication-wise,
that
including building their just the core messaging
Mhm.
and annual reports, branding, just website. But a lot of this kind of discussion, right?
Yeah.
What are we trying to do? And so always half of it, I think, is the discussion about the business and the problems. Yeah, I've got one. Got a couple in here. Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, good?
Thank
Motion.
you.
Thank you very
Enjoyed
much.
it.
I appreciate your being
Wait,
here.
excuse me, yeah, we have to approve the minutes. I'm sorry.
Oh, you have some actions here.
Are there any public participation of non-intended and consent agenda items?
No, Madam Mayor.
Seeing there are none, approval of the minutes.
So moved.
I don't know who was, I think the vice mayor got you by a split second. And moved by the vice mayor, seconded by Commissioner Hardy. All those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. Motion carries unanimously with
Motion
Vice Mayor
to
Pro
adjourn.
Tem absent. Motion to
Seconded.
adjourn, seconded by Commissioner Hardy. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Mayor
all
and
very
Commission.
much.
Thank you so much. Good job, guys.